Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. Monster show here today, Sam. We're going to touch on all 32 teams somehow in around 2 hours. We're going to do it. Team needs for all 32, baby.
Doesn't seem like something we'll successfully achieve, but let's go.
Producers are doubting us, and we're already falling behind with our banter. So give me your mug check. We'll hit the news, and we'll go team by team. Mug check, what we got? It's a different one. Oh, Cafe Beignet from Nolans. It made it safely on the flight home, I see. From the
It survived.
That's great. I've got the Yeti, which I wash every night and then use again in the morning. Show us your mugs.
Allegedly.
Everybody. You can't show us your mugs, but tell us about them in the chat. We've got some breaking news. The Cowboys have made a move. They are not standing pat this offseason. They trade a 5th-round pick for Patriots quarterback Joe Milton. They also got a 7th-round pick in return. By the way, teams are doing this pick swap thing. Very rarely now you're seeing a pick for a player. They got to have another pick thrown back in there so they keep their draft capital intact, keep a little bit of flexibility. But Joe Milton for a 5, he was just a 6th-round pick just a year ago for the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, I get it for Dallas. I get the idea that we saw enough from Joe Milton. By the way, literally right as we decided to start recording, my computer decided to run a self-cleaning thing, so it's about to explode. I'm trying to force quit it right now, and it's not doing it. So who knows? Bad things. Well, we'll see if it survives. Anyway,
you have our spreadsheet. That's why you should print out all of your information just in case.
Yeah,
just in case.
I get it from Dallas's perspective. What we saw at the end of last season, albeit in just one game, was extremely enticing for an already enticing athletic physical specimen like Joe Milton, right? The physical tools were amazing at draft time, and then we saw last year, at least in one game, that it can translate to the NFL level. So for the kind of compensation that Dallas gave up, I'm all for throwing that towards him, right? It's different from the old classic, Rob Johnson, AJ Feely, Kevin Cobb world, where that type of sample size ended up costing a 2nd-round pick, and that's insane. But for what they gave up, hell yeah. I don't understand why the Patriots would take that deal. It's
Me neither.
Barely upgrading the pick they spent on him in the first place. And as we just said, he did show something late last season. And it wasn't just late in the year. There were reports in training camp that he was outperforming Drake May and all this kind of stuff. The reports around Milton have been generally good for the Patriots since they drafted him. So I don't really understand why you would give him up for that kind of compensation, which is a marginal upgrade of a day 3 pick. Just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. And look, Joe Milton, he definitely had some accuracy issues in college. The very little that we saw of him last year, he's very athletic with a cannon for an arm, right? Very little we saw last year. Preseason, he looked really good. Athletic, arm, accuracy was much better, and he looked outstanding in the one game against Bills backups. For whatever that's worth, feels like it might have been worth holding on to as a backup. So now the Cowboys get the high-end backup. They're not trading Dak anywhere. It's almost impossible to trade Dak's contract, nor should they. But it's an awesome 5th-round pick for Joe Milton and the upside that he brings to the table. I think is a good move for the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, particularly, but there was a rumor out there somewhere that the Browns are going to try and get Dak Prescott. I'm pretty sure that that's basically impossible cap-wise for both teams. I don't think either team can make that happen, even if they wanted to. Even if Jerry and Haslam were talking that up at the meetings, each one of them would love to make it happen. I don't think it's possible for either side.
The Browns would have 97% of their cap locked up in 2 quarterbacks this year. So
I don't Myles Garrett. Yeah, and everyone else got to play for the veteran minimum.
Right, and they can't even fit him under the cap, so it's not happening. All right, so here's the deal. We're gonna go team by team. We're gonna start in the NFC East. Philadelphia. I'm going to go Dallas Cowboys. I'm going by our spreadsheet here, Sam. Dallas Cowboys first. We're going to go. So they're up. Sorry, Ben. I'm not using your list. I got to use the spreadsheet list. We're going to go team by team, 3 to 4 minutes per team, discuss their biggest needs heading into the draft. And I'll try to give some players, some discussion around maybe some of the potential fits here. You ready to go?
Sure.
Do you have your spreadsheet open? Is the computer working?
Yeah, different computers. Yeah, I got the laptop /second screen down here.
Perfect.
So this one's not exploding. The main computer where we're running this thing is trying to explode.
Oh, great. So I'll be ready for my solo cam, just if needed. Last housekeeping item. Housekeeping. We'll be in a studio at some point. Check the Mic Studios being built, and join us on draft night. We're going to be live. Just get ready. Just put it in your calendar. Thursday night, April 24th, April 25th. Be with Check the Mic all night talking draft.
Let's hope the tornado didn't take it out.
Great. Yeah, I was up till 3:00 tornado watching, by the way, protecting my home, getting ready to get the kids to the basement just in case. We're all good here, though, in Cincinnati. All right, team needs, baby. Let's start with the Cowboys. They just traded for Joe Milton. Check that box. Don't need a quarterback anymore. What are the team needs for the Cowboys?
Yeah, don't need QB2 anymore. I think wide receiver outside of CeeDee Lamb is a significant need for them. I mean, they've torn that down. It's all the Jalen's. It's Jonathan Mingo. It's, they're in desperate need, I think, of a wide receiver 2, albeit one that may play outside predominantly, given how much of CeeDee Lamb's deployment is in the slot. Defensive line, I think, outside of Odigizua, who they brought back, and obviously Micah Parsons, who they're trying to re-sign to a long-term deal. That story is hilarious, by the way, that we're negotiating with Micah, and then what does his agent think about it? Who? What? I don't even know his name.
Don't get into it.
Anyway, don't have time for that today. And then they still need a running back, I think. I don't love what they've done to patch that up. Javonte Williams, their approach this offseason has been like buy low and a bunch of former first-round talents, which is fine, but probably not making a huge impact. So those would be my 3 biggest ones, but they need quite a lot of things.
They do, and they're usually one of those teams that checks the need boxes along the way in the draft. I'll throw a linebacker in there too with DeMarvion Overshown, coming off of injury. Yeah, they took a shot on Jack Sanborn, buy low there, Kenneth Murray. I know they had Carson Schlesinger from UCLA in for one of their 30 visits, so he could be in the mix in round 2. When you talk about that receiver need, I think Teteroa McMillan at 12, the more I think about him and CeeDee Lamb, I think McMillan, he's my top non-Travis Hunter receiver in the draft. So I would love him for a few different teams. I'll mention him for a few different teams, but I still think he should be in play for Dallas at 12 if he lasts that long. I think Dylan Sampson maybe at running back. We did our running back takes yesterday. Instead of thinking about a Marion Hampton, instead of thinking about Ashton Genty falling, thinking about that second wave of running backs, I think Sampson could be a nice fit there. And for defensive tackle, again, if you can't get Kenneth Grant and some of those top big body nose tackle, maybe Jamari Caldwell from Oregon in the middle rounds. It does feel like a draft where Dallas can tick off all those needs. I would just want to do it from a positional value standpoint along the way.
They might be a sneaky team for defensive line with that first pick. I mean, everyone's been kind of putting a receiver or a running back to them. They might actually be much more sensible to go best pass rusher, at the top of the draft, and then come back where all the value is in the second and the third round and get your wide receiver, get your running back. Because, I don't love McMillan at that spot. I don't even love necessarily his fit in that, with the complementary piece of CeeDee Lamb already in place. I wonder if they would be better off coming in the second round and targeting a different type of receiver there. And then, in the third round, all the running backs we were talking about yesterday, so many of those guys fit in that kind of third round range. So maybe that's the way they should go.
I like those ideas, Sam. That was good. That's the Cowboys. One team down, 31 to go. Let's go New York Giants. Their biggest team needs, and then we'll talk about some potential fits there for them.
The New York Giants, I had initially quarterback down. I still think they need a quarterback despite Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston being a 1-2 duo and then Cutlets being there for the vibes. Offensive line, I think, is still a mess. It's still a work in progress. They've addressed it. They've added bodies. They're moving in the right direction, but it's still not good. And then, defensive depth, defensive line, cornerback too, a bunch of places on the defensive side, they could still add talent.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, if they go QB, look, I think cornerback issues, Travis Hunter could come in there. That's if they want to replace a Deontay Banks, maybe have Hunter come in a corner and be potentially be wide receiver 2, fill 2 different spots at number 3. I think Hunter's going to be their guy at 3. And then, I'll say for other QB needy teams, insert your favorite developmental quarterback. I think the Giants will be in that mix for if Shadur Sanders falls, we start Giants watch, Browns watch, teams that passed him up potentially at 2 and 3 respectively. And then do they trade up from the top of the second round Sanders. They might be able to do both, right? There is this world where the Browns come away with Abdul Carter and Shedeur Sanders. The Giants come away with Hunter and Sanders. Maybe they go full Colorado, trying to reclaim some Alamo Bowl glory from Colorado. They lost in the Alamo Bowl. Maybe they try to recreate Colorado, and that's where they go there. Interior offensive line depth, that'll be interesting for the Giants to see, where they go there. I think it's, Donovan Jackson on the turn is going to be a hot name from Ohio State. Tyler Booker, if he lasts into the second round, on the turn there, could be in the mix there for the Giants.
They're in a tough spot because the positions that they need to upgrade are now positions that they previously tried to address. So in order to fix the current problems, it necessitates acknowledging that you screwed it up the first time around, right? So John Runyon is a starting guard right now, but he was a guy that at the time didn't look like he was going to fix a position. They spent, pretty reasonable money on him. He's still a problem spot. So you either need to admit, hey, we got it wrong when we tried to sign John Runyon to fix it. John Michael Schmitz, we loved as a process move, loved as a potential fix. Hasn't been yet. I would say you could or should be looking to upgrade him as well. But again, he's a guy you drafted to fix the position. So that's always a tough spot for NFL personnel guys where like the position that still needs to be fixed is one that you tried to fix already, which involves sort of acknowledging your mistakes and trying to do it again.
The one other thing I'll mention is I would love to see the Giants come away with a pass rusher next to Dexter Lawrence. So if it's your undersized-ish type of pass rusher to go next to the 340-pound Dexter Lawrence, TJ Sanders from South Carolina, Omar Norman Lott, two guys would have to probably be on day two. Norman Lott could drop due to some injury concerns, but those are two guys that I think would fit really well next to Big Dex in New York. All right, man, let's go. Philadelphia Eagles, the defending Super Bowl champions, biggest needs.
They don't have one. I mean, they could use the right guard. That's about it.
It's got to be the D-line. It has to be the D-line, though, right? They just won the Super Bowl with Josh Sweat, who just made, $20 million. Milton Williams just made $26 million. They have to see those as not their acute needs because they just had them on the team. They must want to replace them in the draft here.
Yeah, but it's literally just depth. Like they've got players that they've got, like the reload is already there in terms of starters. Like Maro Ajomo is ready to step in. Jalix Hunt is already stepped up relative to when he was drafted. They brought in Josh Uche as a buy low guy to add to the rotation. Like, yeah, they will and should definitely reload and continue the depth. But like, again, we're talking depth. Like every other team, there's a glaring need where like they need starters here, they need upgrades here. The Eagles just need to add depth, except right guard, where they probably don't want Tyler Steen starting, which is how Mekhi Becton won that job in the first place last year.
Yeah, they have signed a whole bunch of, cast-off type of edges or, just veteran short-term pieces, I think, to fill some of the depth spots. I don't know if that speaks to what the Eagles think of this draft class as far as the depth goes, as far as edge rush goes. But they brought in Josh Uche. Still have Bryce Huff. Jalix Hunt was looking good last year. I would still rather – I just know the way they work, man, and I think they're going to want to continue to get young there.
The Bryce Huff thing is interesting, by the way. Like, they didn't get rid of him in this offseason. I think a lot of people thought that might happen. He was a healthy scratch in the Super Bowl. Remember, like a big kind of offseason free agent signing who had been arguably the most efficient situational pass rusher in the NFL over the last couple of years, completely bombed for the Eagles to the point where he was a healthy scratch in the Super Bowl. But he's still there. And like that talent didn't disappear. Like Bryce Huff didn't stop becoming a useful player the second he arrived in Philadelphia. Like he didn't cheesesteak his way out of capability. So I wonder if maybe, I don't know why the transition was so rough for him I wonder if he will have a more useful impact this year than he did a year ago.
Azeez Ojulari is there as well as a veteran. I still wouldn't hate them being in the market for whichever edge might fall or, be available at the end of the first round. Nick Scourton from Texas A&M, Jack Sawyer, maybe not at the first round, but somewhere in the second or third round. If Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College is still there, I still wouldn't hate them being in the mix at edge or at defensive tackle, right? They do have a spot to replace Milton Williams directly. So if Walter Nolan is there at the end of the first, if Derek Harmon is there at the end of the first, I know they've spent first rounders on defensive tackles, 2 out of the last 4 years, going back to 2022. but would not hate seeing even more of that. I know there's some Tyler Steen love in the chat here at guard. I don't know if he's necessarily locked in there. I think the other Bama guard, Tyler Booker, would be in play as well, adding some just more size and power to what they already have in Philly to replace Mekhi Becton. I think Booker would be a good plug-and-play type of starter back end of the first.
And then succession plans, like it's depth and succession plans. Like, do they want the tight end that allows them to move on from Dallas Goedert? Do they want a cornerback that is sort of a future as opposed to a Dory Jackson who's a stopgap? You know, those types of players.
The one other name I'll mention, just because I think they're going to draft a couple defensive linemen, David Walker from Central Arkansas, mid-round pick. Love that guy. Brandon Graham body type. So you got to get it. You know, you got to make him. You got to fit him in Philly because he's got the Graham body type. You know, Graham just retired. Get David Walker in there. It's the only way to do it. Washington Commanders, their biggest needs here, Sam.
The Washington Commanders' biggest needs, edge rusher, obviously, still always. Since they traded away their two edge rushers, they have had maybe one of the worst edge rusher situations in the NFL. Atlanta's up there. Chicago was up there until they made their trade. But like they've had a real problem at that spot. It's still a problem. I think they could use safety. I think they could still use some offensive line competition / depth / potential upgrades. But edge rusher by far and away their biggest need.
Yeah, so we're talking back end of the first round. A lot of the names I just said for the Eagles, I think those guys could be available, right? Depending on where the positional runs go in the first round, the back end of the first. I don't know what ends up happening with James Pierce or with Mike Green, the two guys that we think are probably top 15 type of players that have off-field questions. Are they available in the back end of the first? We saw the recent mock earlier this week with Eric Edholm putting Landon Jackson from Arkansas there. I think Nick Scarton from Texas A&M, second round Princely Uman-Mielen from Ole Miss, all those guys in the mix as edge rushers, I think, for Washington. And they're a team that I think could double up at that particular spot, or even on the interior where they did pay for Javon Kinlaw. They did draft Johnny Newton last year. They have Daron Payne, but we're talking depth, man. We're talking continuing to add that defensive line depth, and what Dan Quinn did in Dallas, getting after the passer with multiple pass rushers all over the place. I think they do want to try to replicate that as much as possible.
Do you have a strong take on the IPP guy that they just signed on the edge?
Upside play for sure.
Nice.
How's that? What's his skill? Give us the 15-second scouting report.
He's got a name that's very difficult to pronounce. It's a start. TJ Magarianga. He's a Zimbabwean rugby player who went through the South African schools program. So that's a good thing. South African schools program is very good for rugby. He was signed with Claremont, who was like a legit top 14 team, but he wasn't playing for them really. But like 6'5", he was 225 when he was a rugby player, but they've called him a defensive end. So I'm assuming he's put on some size since then, but like athlete, you know what I mean? So we're going to be talking to the head of the IPP. I am today, in fact. So great time to do it because this guy got signed by Washington. Jordan Pataya, another rugby player, got signed by the Chargers. Like that program's got some athletes now, and they're sending people to NFL rosters.
Chargers filled their tight end need with a rugby player. You're even doing a little consulting with NFL teams. You're becoming the IPP expert around the NFL. So, word's getting around that you're the guy.
Yeah, misleading words are getting around from your lips.
May have told some people that you know more than you do, and they're calling. What do you know? Not much. Anyway, safety is the other one I know you put down originally as one of the needs. The Commanders could be in the mix for Nicky Manwari from South Carolina, Malachi Starks from Georgia, with that first-round pick in the back end of the first.
I know a lot of people as well have said Washington need a running back. I still like their duo. Like I like Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler. They get younger. Chris Rodriguez is there as well. He's a really talented player. Like
I like Rodriguez.
If they drafted one in the mid rounds, given especially this running back class, like I wouldn't hate it, right? Because this is a talented class. We love a lot of these running backs. But I wouldn't call it a need, right? Which is what the show is.
All right, there we go. NFC East is done. That's like its own VOD. All right, its own VOD. We'll division by division. Let's go.
Easy.
NFC South is next in your spreadsheet here, Sam. Let's go Atlanta Falcons. We're cranking through it, man. We're not even going to have no conversation, no talking, just get down to business.
We can do tight shows. What's the problem?
We're an eighth of the way there, Sam. We'll see how it goes.
Atlanta defensive line still. I was trying to work out whether it's more acute on the edge than it is on the interior, and ultimately I think they just still need the whole thing. Edge rusher at least has, or interior rather, at least has more of the bodies that they drafted last year when they just spammed defensive line after passing up on one to draft Michael Penix Jr. at the top of the draft. But, can you rely on any of the players they drafted last year, right? Braylon Trice, and injuries were a huge part in not seeing anything from them last year, so I don't want to write them off. But the point is, when you haven't seen anything from a bunch of young guys, going into year two, it's really hard to then rely on them as the thing that's going to be better this year. But like Brandon Dorlus, Rook Orororo, and Braylon Trice, 3 guys that they drafted last year, basically didn't see anything in a massive positive way from any of them. So, you've got David Onyemata there, you've got Morgan Fox, you've got some bodies, but I think they would really like to upgrade any of those. On the edge, you've got Leonard Floyd, who they brought over as like a stopgap. You've got Arnold Ebiketie, who hasn't, really developed, and then you've got Braylon Trice, etc. The whole defensive line, I think, is still an option.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, take your favorite offensive lineman at pick 15, maybe trade down. I mean, defensive lineman, trade down, maybe even still get your favorite defensive lineman. Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, I think, is in the mix. Mike Green, James Pierce, some of the guys we like, Ezeraku, who we mentioned. So if you're going edge, I know Falcons fans, you're just like, oh, we've drafted all the edges through the years. Did they get Charles Harris? No, they Tack McKinley, Vic Beasley. There was one other in there, right? That it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the moves Thomas Dimitroff made in the first round and whether or not they worked. You need to go edge. But if you want to go defensive tackle and it's a Walter Nolan or it's a Kenneth Grant, or I'm fine with all that. But I think it's a double up, man. I think it's a double up on the D line type of world for Atlanta. I think we did that in their mock draft the other day. And if you add those 2 plus the 3 draftees from last year, then it feels like, oh, look at this youth infusion on the defensive line. You might even get some comparisons to what the Rams did, which was 4 draft picks on the D-line in 1 year to essentially try to replace Aaron Donald. And it kind of worked. By the end of the year, they were looking good. So you might get Raheem Morris thinking, hey, we need to replicate that for the Falcons.
Yeah. Other needs, do they need a new center after Drew Dahlman left in free agency? I would think they would probably like competition for that spot rather than just handing it over. And then what else do they have? Cornerback 2. Like, do you trust Mike Hughes? He had a pretty good year last year, and he has, former high draft pick pedigree, et cetera, but he has a lot of bad tape in his NFL career before that, surprisingly productive season last year for the Falcons. That's another one of those ones where you can either see that as like, oh, look what we found, like this gem, this hidden diamond in the rough, or you can be like, is that going to happen again? Do we actually want to find a better player here? So I would be looking for another starting corner as well.
Yeah, it can even be a developmental type of guy that, they did sign Hughes for a couple of years, but just to have the depth and the extra look, middle of the second round, if you're picking 40 between picks 32 and 45, I will keep repeating the quarterbacks who got hurt, who have first round talent, Benjamin Morrison, Shavon Ravel, if those guys are there. I think that's one of the stories of the draft. I might mention that for 4 or 5 different teams here. Falcons, those are their needs and some options. Let's go Carolina Panthers now.
Carolina Panthers still need,
it's gonna be all pass rush
defensive line,
all pass rushers.
Yeah. Though I think you can argue they still need wide receiver 1. Like, unless you think Xavier Legette is going to become that guy, I think you can argue they still need that alpha passing target. They've got good receivers, but they have depth receivers, right? Adam Thielen is still good, although reaching the end. Jalen Coker looks like a real find, but not as a number 1. They have passing weapons, but they don't have that number 1 guy unless Legette becomes that guy. After that, or alongside that, then yes, it's still defensive line.
So let's start on the D line there. They're picking at 8. I think that's right around the spot where all the pass rushers are intriguing, but have a question, right? A question mark, whatever it might be. I think all those guys are in play. Jalen Walker or Mykel Williams from Georgia, Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. Like any of those names are in play. Mike Green, James Pierce. Would they be able to trade down? I don't know if anybody – it's not a great spot for teams to trade up. I think that's right around when you start to run out of some of the blue chip players. But take your favorite defensive lineman there at 8 and then, maybe hit receiver on the turn in the second round.
It's not a great spot to trade down unless, the thing with those defensive line guys is like each one of them has some kind of thing, like red flag, if you like, that's a little bit scary. And it's kind of like pick the thing you're least scared of and draft that guy, right? That's sort of how I think of that group in that area. Pick the thing that you have the fewest concerns about, whether it's sample size, whether it's unusual body type, whether it's small school, whether it's off field, whatever the thing is, and just draft that guy, and that's your best shot. If you don't like that, there's a chance that there's a team out there, picking lower down that loves this guy, right? I'm not scared at all by the thing that you're scared of, whether it's size, whether it's sample size, whatever. That team is a trade partner, potentially, right? So while you might be scared of all the red flags and be like, man, I wish we could pick lower down, there might be a team out there who goes, I don't care if this guy only rushed the passer 350 times. Let's go, right? And wants to trade up for a Jalen Walker at that spot. So maybe it's not a good trade spot. On the other hand, I could see that being the perfect place for a team that really wants the right edge rusher and sees him available there.
Jalen Walker is going to be one of the biggest wild cards in the draft. Some people have him in the top 5, close to Abdul Carter, maybe an Abdul Carter light. Other people see him as a late first into the second. They worry about the inexperience, the two-position versatility that, didn't have him majoring in one thing, and maybe that's some risk. So I think Jalen Walker, one of the biggest wild cards on draft night. In that second round, though, I think we gave them Trey Harris the other day. I think we had a little bit of a run on receivers in the second round. If that doesn't happen in real life, though, they might have their choice of some of the pretty good, top 5-ish type of receivers. If they fall and they're available in the second round, I think Carolina might have a chance there. Don't forget, the Panthers in the second round, they gave up their second rounder. So the Bears are picking with their second rounder closer to the top of the second round. The Panthers have the Rams second round pick, so they're picking closer to the bottom there. But I think receiver could have good value there in the second. If Jaden Higgins is still there, your guy Jalen Royals is still there, I think they have some pretty good options there to add some weapons for Bryce Young.
Yeah. And then I think the other spot is linebacker. I think you mentioned that recently, that somebody to play next to Josie Jewell, I think would be a good thing for them.
Schlesinger, Demetrius Knight from South Carolina, Schlesinger from UCLA. Both of those guys are the most common round 2 options as far as linebacker goes. Look at that. This isn't fixing every team, but it's giving some suggestions, giving some player suggestions. New Orleans Saints, Sam, biggest needs here heading into the draft for the Saints.
New Orleans Saints. I mean, quarterback is the intriguing thing because Derek Carr is still there. He's obviously not the long-term future. You've also got Spencer Rattler from a year ago, but is that a need? Defensive interior, I think, is their biggest need on that defensive line. I actually kind of like people say edge all the time. I actually think their starters are fine, right? Granderson and Chase Young. It doesn't feel amazing because Granderson is a sort of classic underappreciated edge rusher, and Chase Young, I think, is a little bit maligned because of what we thought he should be as opposed to what he's become. And admittedly, like, injuries have been an issue for him, so there's a question mark there as well. But if you get a healthy season from Chase Young like you did last year, and you have Granderson, and you still have a little bit of depth there, I'm okay with edge. Interior, though, there's nobody that's making an impact right now. Like, Brian Brzee has not developed yet into any kind of impact playmaker. They need a defensive tackle. I think that can make a real difference.
Yeah, and they've struggled, right, with Brzee in the first, on the edge with Isaiah Foskey in the second. They've struggled with some of their picks in recent years. Of course, you can go back further to Peyton Turner. Only got the 4 years out of Marcus Davenport in the first round. So I know that might give Saints fans a little PTSD, like, oh, no, we can't go defensive line again in the first, but you kind of have to, I think. So I think all those big-bodied nose tackles are in play for the Saints. Would love, because Brzee, I know he can rush the passer a little bit, Sam. His problem is run game has been an issue all the way back to Clemson, holding the point, playing the run. I think he could rush the passer a little bit, right? And if you just put him into that role, if you can get a Kenneth Grant, Maybe later it's a Deion Walker, one of the big 320 to 350 pounders available in this draft. I think that could help free up Brzee just a little bit. I think they're also hoping Devon Godshaw does some of that, even though, he's an okay nose tackle presence here.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think it is only a little bit. Like he still plays, far too upright, and he'll get some pressure, but he's too easy to just knock by the quarterback and keep on his pathway. Like, he's not for a first round type of pick. He's just not an impact player for them.
So, yeah, that's why I'm saying I think the 330, 340 pounders are all good. Cornerback is the other one. I think starting corner for the Saints. So much like we talked about, did we give them Trey Amos? I forget who we gave them in the second round, but we had that discussion about all the second round corners. I think that would be great back-to-back years of maybe if you could get Kool-Aid McKinstry last year in the second, pick your favorite second round available corner. I think you might have something there if you're the Saints.
And then I think you can make a case that like 3 or 4 of the 5 offensive line spots could use, a succession plan or an upgrade or, an immediate starter right now. Like, I think the offensive line needs work on it still.
So I like all those fits for all those options for the Saints. I would maybe attack some of that offensive line in the second round or beyond. You can't pick everybody in the second round, but the Saints could be in the mix for Arante Ursary, tackle from Minnesota, if they do want to have, because Trevor Penning heads into the last year of his deal. Ryan Ramczyk, we're kind of eliminating. If you want Ursary to maybe step in 2026 as the starting right tackle, you could play that game or go with the developmental offensive line option a little bit later in the draft. Let's round out the NFC South with the Tampa Bay Bucs, a team we've talked about. They've got pretty good depth right now. So what are we looking for the Bucs?
Yeah, they do. I think they could use an edge rusher still. Like, Hassan Reddick is signed, but he's on a 1-year deal. And the way last year went, I don't know how confident you can be in what you're going to get out of Reddick this year. Yaya Diaby, I think, is their best pass rusher at this point, on the edge at least. So I would definitely like to see an edge rusher added to them. Doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be the first round. At some point, they need to plan for a future beyond Levante David, even though he seems to show no sign of ever stopping. And then, maybe they need a left guard, but it's a pretty good roster. It's not too many holes.
Yeah, I know we've said this on a few different shows, but I love the Jihad Campbell fit for the Bucs because good all-around 3-down linebacker, blitzes really well. Some people love him maybe even as a third-down pass rusher, edge rush type of presence. Great fit for Todd Bowles and what he likes to do, and I think the best all-around linebacker in the draft here. So if they went linebacker in round 1 with Campbell, I think he's the one linebacker that probably deserves to go round 1. I think that would be a great fit. As far as edge goes, I could see the Shamar Stewart fit there, as the explosive upside edge rusher who's got a little bit of development time because of the depth that they've built there. Braden Swinson, who you mentioned a bunch in the second round mix during our mock draft the other day out of LSU. Swinson could be there as well. And then if you just want if you want almost like a Hassan Reddick type of clone, Princely, Uman Mielen from Ole Miss does that as well, right? Just designated pass rush type, doesn't play the run great. He's in that Hassan Reddick, Brian Burns type of mold. And I think that would be another way to just add a pass rush presence and complements Braswell, who they drafted who's more of an early down type of edge, drafted in the second round last year. I think Princely's a nice fit there for the Tampa Bay Bucs.
They were one of the teams where when you do this and you kind of look through, like some teams you look through and you're like, man, quite a lot of needs on this roster. There's a few others where you look through and you're like, wow, this roster is actually in pretty good shape. Now, maybe the issue is there's a lot of good players, not a lot of great players. And that might be why you run into a wall, or the quarterback is good, not great. But like Tampa Bay's roster is in pretty good shape. Yeah,
and when I'm looking at needs too, I'm looking at not just players that are there for 2025. How many players are tied up for multiple seasons? And when you do that, when you have you have your starters in place, then you can go into the draft and it doesn't matter what your needs are. You just draft the best players. It's always the best way to go. All right, man. NFC South, we're 2 divisions down, 25% of the way through the NFL. Let's go NFC North. Chicago Bears and their biggest needs here, Sam.
The Bears. cornerback 2, I believe, with the Tyreek Stevenson thing sort of seeming to have gone sour. Really, from the moment he was caught jawing at the fans while a Hail Mary was taking place behind him. And then at the end of that, conspired to be the guy knocking it into the hands of the Washington receiver. Basically, that seemed to start like the beginning of the end for Tyreek Stevenson. And they don't, I mean, Terrell Smith has played in lieu of him sometimes, but I don't know that they see that as like, well, if we just move on from Tyreek and hand the position over to Terrell. I think they maybe need a new starting cornerback on the other side of Jalen Johnson. The rest of that, though, again, we're now into kind of depth places. Like the offensive line was by far the biggest need heading into the offseason. They've clearly made massive strides on that with all the moves they've made. Do they both those linebackers that they signed a couple of years ago were being talked about as potential cap casualties? Like if they're going to cut TJ Edwards, for example, they could use a starting linebacker, but if they're going to keep them both and they don't, running back, do they want the upgrade there? That's they're being talked about with Genty in the first round a lot because the running back, position is not amazing, but it's not like an acute glaring need.
Yeah, it's an interesting roster for Chicago. If we do look at corner and we say, look, Tyreek Stevenson, he's played well. He's played okay overall, I would say, or across 2 years. You don't always give up on that. But if you are going to, are they in the first round Will Johnson type of mix or Jahdae Barron type of mix? If they're not, add them to the bunch of teams that if Shavon Ravel and Benjamin Morrison are there in the second, Darian Porter from Iowa State, one of those second-round picks they could use on a corner. I think they should, as we talked about in the 2-round mock, probably should grab one of the running backs with one of those twos, or I think that they will. I'm not saying that they necessarily should. I had somebody on Twitter give the bold take that they draft both Ohio State running backs with their 2 twos, which I loved as a concept. Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. But if they use, I would much rather see them use one of those second-rounders, which they're still getting from the Bryce Young trade, by the way, from the Panthers. They should use one of those twos on a running back. I say draft the best player available at 10, which still could be an edge rusher, even though they brought in Dayo Odeyingbo. They have Montez Sweat. They have 2 young developmental players, Austin Booker, Dominique Robinson, behind those guys. If they get a Michael Williams there, if they get a Jalen Walker there, would not hate that whatsoever. So I think the Bears, I know you talked about their specific needs and didn't mention edge or D tackle. I still think another young body there would be great in the first 2 rounds. You could fill the running back need. You could fill the cornerback need with those 3. They have 3 picks in the top 42.
Yeah, you could. I mean, it's edge is or defensive line is one of those positions that, like the Eagles show, right? You're never set. I mean, you keep adding bodies until you got 8 guys and you're happy with them all. So Chicago could absolutely keep adding defensive line bodies, but I think they've done a good job along with the offensive moves. I don't like the individual moves as much, but signing guys like Grady Jarrett, like I think it fills the need.
One other position I'll mention is safety with Jaquan Brisker's concussion issues. Kevin Byard heading into the last year of his deal. Maybe safety is also in the mix. I mean, so I think they have a good roster, but there's also a lot of potential fits for those 2 second-rounders that I'm thinking about, whether it's Eamon Wari, if he's still there, some of the top safeties, Xavier Watts in the second round. There's a lot of positions I would love to see the Bears attack: corner, safety, edge, running back, with those top 3 picks that they have there.
And because they have that kind of extra second, if you like, I wonder if it sort of opens up some possibilities of trades. Do they get aggressive? Do they want one of the blue chip guys? Like, are they a quiet trade candidate in the first round? They're sitting there, at 10, is it? And everyone's sort of like, well, that's a great place for Ashton Genty or whatever. But like, with an extra second round pick in your pocket, I wonder if that would put you into Mason Graham or Abdul Carter range if you really wanted one of those guys.
Love it. Yeah, they've I think they've done a good job the last couple of years adding that depth. Of course, a lot will come down to Caleb Williams and how he takes to Ben Johnson's system. But yeah, the roster, I think, in much better shape than it was a couple of years ago in Chicago. Let's go, friends of the show. Detroit Lions. Lions paying the bills, baby. Lions' biggest needs here, Sam.
Yeah, another team without a ton of holes. Edge rusher, I think, opposite Aiden Hutchinson is still the biggest need. Marcus Davenport is basically he's defensive line Jason Verrett at this point, right? Keep re-signing him as the price goes cheaper and cheaper, and maybe 1 year you'll get the year where he stays healthy, plays 500-600 snaps and you can get like a really important player out of him, but it's basically a shot to nothing at this point. I think they could use that secondary player there. I think cornerback depth was attacked well in free agency, like bringing in DJ Reed, I think was huge. Maybe you would still want a contingency added there, given Amik Robinson's coming back from injury. The other starter is two young guys, Terrion Arnold or Ennis Rakestraw. And then, maybe offensive guard depth, like the starters are there. You've got a young guy from a year ago. You've got Graham Glasgow, who's getting old, but like, I would like to see them add, if, at the very minimum, a player that could compete at one of those two spots or be insurance, even if he's not like this guy's coming in to start day one.
Georgia's Tate Ratledge. I'm just going to keep pushing him on
Mullet.
Everybody. Is there a better fit than him in Detroit? Let's suggest Ratledge maybe for the Lions. When you're talking about that late, I really think the late first round edge rush options are going to be really interesting for the Lions. I think Ezeraku from Boston College could still be there. I still think Jack Sawyer's closer to a first-round player than a third-round player. I know some people are going to say, he's not athletic enough. He's just another Sam Hubbard type, Ohio State, make that comp. He's just a good, really good football player. If the Lions got Jack Sawyer from Ohio State in the second round, wouldn't hate that. But I honestly think they could double up on edge and just say, not even that they don't want to have, it's not even Aiden Hutchinson insurance. It's just having the guy that can win opposite Aiden Hutchinson is huge. So Princely for him too, designated pass rush type, third down. How do you create those mismatches? Having somebody opposite Aiden Hutchinson is going to be huge, and maybe having multiple options for the future to future-proof that position. We'd love to see Detroit maybe even double up there because they do have such good depth everywhere else, as you mentioned. I think the secondary is in good shape. Receiving core is in good shape. Could they add another body there because they might not be able to re-sign every single player that is heading into the last year or two of their contract in future years? Could they add more receiving weapons? Maybe. But again, they're in a very good shape from a roster perspective. Would really love to see them just continue to add that defensive line depth, though.
Particularly because they got rid of Zadarius Smith. They cut him because of the contract. The reports are they're kind of open to a return, like he might come back on a cheaper deal. But he made an impact last year when they traded for him and brought him over. So if they could get him back, I think that would go some way towards, helping. But I think they would definitely like to find that second starter edge rusher.
All right, let's round out. No, I'm sorry. We had two more. NFC North. Green Bay Packers are next.
So you've got the question of whether they need wide receiver one, right? The Josh Jacobs wants wide receiver one. They seem to have a whole bunch of wide receivers 2, 3, and beyond. But do they have that wide receiver one? Do they need that wide receiver one? Like that, they certainly don't have it. I don't know if they need it, right? I think there is. You can make an argument that you can create this receiving core in the aggregate, and you don't actually need the number one guy. However, it becomes harder to make that argument when the team does seem to have a level, right? And like last year, the pattern was every time Green Bay ran up against an elite team, they lost. Every time they weren't playing an elite team, they won. If you want to correlate that directly to, well, if you had a wide receiver one, that wouldn't happen, right? It's hard to it's at least hard to dispute that directly, right? So that's one question. Do they need that wide receiver one? Outside that, I think it's defensive depth / starters. I think they need defensive line because those young guys did not develop at all last year. And then I think they need another cornerback, whether it's a starter on the outside opposite Jair Alexander or whether it's a Jair Alexander replacement. If you're going to trade him away, either way, I think corner is starting to become a glaring need for them.
That corner feels like the biggest one to me. I guess I'm just assuming Jair is not going to be there, but that's why I think they're in the mix for a cornerback in round one, which is an interesting position from a value perspective. Will Johnson from Michigan has been talked about as a top 10 pick forever. He keeps falling. The positional value of cornerbacks seems to be falling in recent years, the way they are landing in the draft. Could Will Johnson be available there? Could Jahdae Barron be available there at pick 23? They're in the mix for all the second. There's a plethora of corners between 32 and 50 on the consensus board, so they could be in the mix there. Isaiah Thomas from Florida State. I think all those guys are potential options for as CB2. If they go D-line, they could be in the Shamar Stewart sweepstakes. Get the much like Rashawn Gary a few years ago, they kind of got the lower production, high upside type of athlete. They could go down that path again with Shamar Stewart in the first round. And the wide receiver one thing, I just think it's like a talking point, right? It's like, do you have a top 15 receiver on your team? And if you don't, I mean, everybody wants one, but where are you going to find it? I don't know that exists in the draft here, but could the Packers use another body to add to Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks? Yeah, they could add another body in there. It won't be the quote wide receiver one, I don't think, but it'll be another receiver. I think all they need is a guy that's dependable every week, where right now they live in this world where 1 week it's Wicks, 1 week it's Reed, 1 week it's Watson. Who's the dependable guy that they can add there, even if they are spreading the wealth week to week?
I don't know. I just don't know that that's necessary. I mean, the 49ers have had years where they've behaved that way as well. But the players are more exciting, so you didn't care, right? Like 1 week it was a George Kittle week, the next week
were all better.
Week. I know, but the point is that doesn't mean anything. Like the fact that 1 week it's Kittle, 1 week it's Debo, 1 week it's Brandon Ayuk, that's not a flaw. That's not like inconsistency in the players. That's just 1 week. It's that guy that cooks. So the fact that Green Bay, the players are worse, I don't think it means it's either a problem that the ball is inconsistently spread around to individual players depending on the matchup, or it's not. And if it's not for the 49ers, I don't think it's automatically a problem for Green Bay just because their players are worse. Like, I don't think it represents a weakness in their receiving core that 1 week it's Jaden Reed, 1 week it's Tucker Kraft, 1 week it's Romeo Doubs. I think that's just the nature of not having one individual alpha guy that's going to cook every single week. I don't think that on its own shows the problem with this type of receiving core.
So either way, without getting into deep discussion here, because we're at a 4-minute cutoff for every single team, Packers could be in the mix to add another body to the receiving core. I agree. It's not necessarily a problem not having a wide receiver one. My point is they can still upgrade because, Dontavian Wicks has a 1 week where he looks great, and then he drops 2 passes the next week. You need consistency in that receiving core. Let's round out the NFC North with the Minnesota Vikings and their biggest needs heading into the draft.
I think their biggest need is pretty clearly cornerback. They might not have one that's high level at all. I mean, you've got Mekhi Blackman coming back from a significant injury, and even he is relatively unproven. They brought over Isaiah Rodgers in free agency. I don't know that you love that as one of your starting corners. Byron Murphy, I'm sort of labeling as a slot guy, so it is a slightly different thing. Obviously, they paid him significant money to come back. He's good, not great in the slot. Jeffrey Okudah is on the tour of every year, just signing one team, kicking the tires, hoping they can figure out why he was the number 3 overall pick and has been terrible in the draft or in the NFL ever since. But you definitely need one starter, I think, in this group. You might need 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think they liked Isaiah Rodgers enough to bring him in to be the starter, but I think there's also absolutely some depth potentially available there. To me, the biggest need's left guard, though, right? That's bigger than cornerback right now for the Vikings. I think if Gray's able in the first round, if they want to have him as a plug and play left guard, I think that would make a lot of sense. I don't know if Booker fits what they want to do offensively as much, Booker from Alabama, but I think left guard is a more acute need than cornerback right now, but they're, similar level, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, so this is an interesting experiment in how much, changing the environment around an individual offensive lineman has an impact. Like they had the entire interior last year was a problem, right? So I think when the entire unit is bad, it's difficult for one guy to stand out in that way. Blake Brendel's obviously not like a high-end starter, but I do wonder how much better he looks when now there's 2 good players either side of him, as opposed to one side was a mess and just the whole interior was collapsing. So yeah, they could absolutely upgrade Blake Brendel pretty easily, I would imagine. But I'm also curious if he immediately looks like a at least viable starter as the weakest link on that offensive line now that the other positions have been upgraded.
He is a returning starter, which, if he is the 5th best offensive lineman, that's better than him competing to be the 3rd best offensive lineman on your line. So the other thing, I mean, the Vikings did a great job this offseason, traded for Jordan Mason as a backup running back, added the center, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries at center and guard, brought in Isaiah Rodgers to at least soften the blow at cornerback a little bit. So, yeah, I think they could be in the first round mix at corner, could be in the – they don't have a ton of draft picks. But second wave of cornerback, they could take a look at that. The other position, wide receiver 3, Jalen Naylor's done a really nice job. If you really want to give J.J. McCarthy all the weapons with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson, do you add another receiver to the mix as well? I think that'd be a fantastic play for Minnesota as well.
I think they are also in potentially the pure nose tackle market. They added those guys in free agency, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen. Those are both interior pass rushing, penetrating type of defensive tackles. Harrison Phillips is still there as the sort of the big bodied run stuffing nose tackle type. But like if they were in the market for, like a CJ West lower in this draft, like just this pure run stuffing type of specialist, I think that would be a potential really nice upgrade for this team.
So put them in the mix for Kenneth Grant, Deion Walker, Alfred Collins. They're at least big. Collins, I don't know if he's a hold the point nose, but the other huge dudes all have potential there. All right, that's the NFC North. Let's go NFC West, rounding out the NFC. Starting with the Arizona Cardinals and their biggest needs. I would have said defensive line for sure, but they've made a lot of moves this offseason.
They did. I think they still need impact defensive players at all 3 levels, which is not to say that you're wrong that they didn't make upgrades. But we said last year when you read out their defensive line, it was like reading a preseason team. It was like reading the second team, right? When the second team comes in, it's like, I know all these guys, but none of them belong starting. And yet that was the first team. That was who they were rolling out there as the top players. Well, since that point, you've added Josh Sweat, you've added Dalvin Tomlinson. I think Baron Browning might be better this year than he was a year ago if the injury that he was battling through is a real thing. And, he has shown evidence that he can be a decent pass rusher. So I think they can be good, but you can still upgrade that, even with, Darius Robinson as well, their former top pick from a year ago. But you could still add another edge rusher. You could still add another defensive tackle. You can definitely still add another linebacker to make an impact. You can definitely add an upgrade at corner, arguably at safety as well. If you can find them an impact player on defense at any level, they fit into this defense still.
All right, let's name some. Who could be in the mix there in the middle of the first round for Arizona? All of the edges that we've talked about previously. Michael Williams from Georgia, Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. I think they're all in play for Arizona. At corner, Jahdae Barron, again, for them. The inside-outside versatility could fit well there. Garrett Williams has stepped up a little bit, but it gives you the ability to maybe put Sean Murphy-Bunting back into the slot. Gives you just some flexibility in the secondary there. They could also be in the mix for all the big nose tackles that we love, the Kenneth Grant types or the second wave of Deion Walker, Alfred Collins, big-bodied nose tackle. So, yeah, I still think there's more work to do on the defensive line. I also love that they attacked it in free agency and made it so they don't have to draft 3 of these guys, maybe just 1 or 2 in this draft to upgrade the defensive line in Arizona.
And then guard, I think, is the other spot on either one / both of them, I think would be at least competition / could upgrade the starter.
I think that definitely makes sense for Arizona more. And that's another reason why filling the D line needs during free agency is important again. So you don't have to double, triple up there. But I do think that second wave of guard could be in the mix there. I don't think they're going to take those guys in the first round, but second wave of guards make a lot of sense. They could be Donovan Jackson in the second round, potentially, for Arizona. With his flexibility, Marcus Mbow from Purdue could be there. The one other, when we were debating, we gave them Jalen Knoll in the mock draft. I'll just say speed receiver because Marvin Harrison feels slow, right? Michael Wilson, they're more in the possession receiver spectrum right now. Straight up speed receiver for Arizona, I think is a nice need that they might be able to fit.
I mean, you could limit it. You could cut it off before receiver and say they just need an injection of speed on the offense, period. Yeah. I mean, James Conner is a really good running back, but he's not a speed guy. Trey Benson brings a little bit more of that, but like generally speaking, this is a pretty slow offense in terms of skill position threats. They've got individuals that can they can do a little bit. Trey McBride is not slow for a tight end, certainly, but he's a tight end. I mean, they are inherently slow relative to 4-3 wide receivers. Greg Dortch has got some speed to him, but yeah, like generally speaking, this is an offense that is absent significant speed.
All right, let's go Los Angeles Rams here. Their biggest need, another team that's done a pretty nice job with their depth over the last couple of years, especially with how young they are.
Yeah, so they were another team that I was sort of surprised by how good the roster was top to bottom when he put it all together, which is kind of why the whole Stafford trade talk at the start of this offseason never made any sense to me, because they were so close a year ago. Remember, they gave the Eagles the best game of anybody in the playoffs. Conceivably, this team could have been a Super Bowl team and could have won the Super Bowl without any changes. Then, as opposed to you got bring Stafford back or just blow that up and rebuild completely. Drake Holiday points out we forgot to mention Calais Campbell re-signed with the Cardinals for 1 year.
Sorry. Yeah, I knew I had something else in my head that they did that was really good as far as defensive line adds. Calais Campbell making his return.
It's almost a decade since he played for them. Like he left 9 years ago, I think, and now he's back for one last go around, presumably for the Cardinals. What a wild career he's had.
He really has, and he's still playing. He's still playing well. I love it. Calais Campbell. Yeah.
So amazing signing for them and amazing career for Calais. So anyway, the Rams, they bring back Stafford. They're ready to go again. I think they could use cornerback depth, cornerback competition, and obviously they need linebackers, but they don't care.
No, they don't care. They always Omar Spates, 7th round, or UDFA, whatever he was, right? They just drop those guys in at linebacker for the Rams. I think they're a really interesting team every time we've done mock drafts in the first round for Malachi Starks at safety there, but really those corners, late first round corners are all in the mix. They're out of a second round pick that they traded for Braden Fisk. I like Braden Fisk. Just remember when we say this at the time, they valued Braden Fisk essentially as 2 second rounders. They spent their own second rounder. Yeah, they got him a year early, but this year's second rounders going to Braden Fisk. It doesn't feel terrible because of the depth that we talked about. It feels like this team has, but I think they're very much in that late first round cornerback / safety mix. And Starks brings some slot versatility, safety versatility. Eamon Warrior could be, thought about there. And then I think the second wave of tight ends potentially there for the Rams. I mean, maybe if Colston Loveland fell, I think Warren will end up going top 15, but if Colston Loveland fell in the first round, that could be in play for the Rams. But I think the second wave of tight ends, Mason Taylor could be just a nice, dependable option if he was there around the 3rd round or so for the Rams.
And obviously, I mean, it's not an acute need, but quarterback succession plan, the Stafford thing clearly is reaching the end, but the Rams have certainly approached it previously the future is its own problem. Like when this ends, it ends, but for now, we're willing to accept the pain when that comes. I don't know how keen they're going to be on let's go. They've been a team paired with Jackson Dart or whatever, if he's available, sort of in the right spots for that. I just wonder how much they care about that. And they're like, when he walks away, eventually it's over. We'll figure that out when it comes.
Yeah. That's what I don't know if I was just being positive this year, but I, ranked QBs 3 through 8 and said they all have developmental QB options, or 4 through 8. Find your favorite one. Kyle McCord, Dylan Gabriel, Will Howard, Jalen Milrow. Find your favorite. Is it a good year for that? Or is it just, we were just skewing positive. Hey, I understand the developmental aspect, but it might be a decent year for the Rams to just take one of those guys, see what you get.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they won't take a quarterback at all. I mean, they drafted Stetson Bennett theoretically because they liked him for the future, but I'm saying they might not be in the Jackson Dart market, at the top end of this draft. They might just grab a guy in day 3 and hope that they stumble into something with a year or two of development.
All right, let's go San Francisco 49ers and their biggest needs. They're the opposite of what we've said with so many of these teams going into the draft with so few needs. The Niners have been stripped down just a little bit the last few weeks.
Yeah, all of a sudden, like again, the difference between what you imagine the roster is and what it actually ends up being once you pick away at it starts to become, it's the opposite way for the 49ers. So they need offensive line help again. They need arguably a left guard, a center, and an offensive tackle. If you consider right tackle is not amazing to begin with, left tackle, Trent Williams is now entering the world, I think, of the tackle where you have to budget in missed time. When he plays, he's still arguably the best tackle in the game. But he's now almost guaranteed to miss time. Like, when was the last time he's played every game without concern? He's now entering the Teron Armstead, the Tyron Smith world, where you probably have to factor in, even if you're not factoring in who's his replacement long term, you need to assume he's not going to play every week. Defensive line outside of Nick Bosa is now like a catastrophe. It was already not great. And they lost Javon Hargrave, they lost Leonard Floyd. Cornerback too, because they've lost players in free agency, safety too. Like, they need a lot of sort of second players at various spots. This is a roster that needs quite a lot of help.
They do. I think the offensive line, look, they've done a nice job with the offensive line developing from within. Jake Brendel at center. They got Pooney last year to play guard. Maybe they'll just bank on their ability to do that. But I think they could be in play at pick 11 for Kelvin Banks from Texas. But the defensive line need is so great. Jalen Walker, if he's there, Mykel Williams, if he's there, both of those guys make sense at defensive line for the Niners. They just have a plethora of picks too. So I've said before, I think this is a video we should do too, like which teams is the draft most important for this year for like this specific season. For the Rams, this particular draft for 2025 might not be the most important. For the Niners, it might be as important as anybody. Much like I talked about Dallas last year. They went in saying, we need a center and a tackle in this draft. We better hit on these guys. They were like 1 for 2. For this season, the San Francisco draft, I think, matters a lot just because of all that they've missing. So they could go any which way. I think, yes, cornerback depth also makes sense. They're in the mix for any of those first or second round guys. But I think they're going to rely on last year's draft picks. A lot of those guys are going to need to step up. Ricky Pearsall, Renato Green, like, they're expecting those guys to step in. But even with those guys added to the mix, we're still talking about starters who need replacements. So I think all of the defensive line options are there. The big-bodied nose tackles are in play for the Niners as well. But especially that first order of business to me is the pass rusher opposite Nick Bosa.
Yeah. I mean, the defensive line, it can't just be Nick Bosa by himself, even no matter how good the defensive lineman is. We've seen this with Myles Garrett before. Like, he needs the cavalry behind him. Like, he needs, reinforcements.
Let's wrap it up. Seattle Seahawks. Biggest needs for the Seahawks heading into the draft.
So it was the interior of the offensive line heading into the offseason, and then they created needs a quarterback and wide receiver, and they've since sort of patched those back together, and it now remains the interior of the offensive line again. Like, arguably they need 3 starters on the interior, and to have for the last year and a half or whatever.
Did Mina agree with you on all of that when you talked about team needs for her Seattle Seahawks on her show?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. I go to Georgia for all those. Grab the Georgia guys. Get them all. Tate Ratledge. Get them all. Jared Wilson, the center. Get the other guard. Dylan Fairchild. Just get all the Georgia interior offensive line fixed in Seattle. The receiver question as well. JSN, Cooper Kupp. Is there a really nice complementary receiver? We gave them Jaden Higgins. Don't forget, they have the 2 second-round picks. So much like the Bears, they have some flexibility in round 2. I think Seahawks fans should feel good coming out of this draft with 3 picks in the top 50 or so, whatever that looks like. Jaden Higgins, I think, would be an awesome fit next to JSN and Cooper Kupp there.
Yeah. Higgins, I love as a fit in this offense.
Or do they go speed with Knoll? Would that feel slow? Because none of Higgins, JSN, and Kupp, none of those guys are speed receivers. I know Valdez-Scantling's there, but that's a 1-year thing. Does that feel too slow? If you're Seattle and they need that injection of speed, that's where a Jalen Knoll might come in, or one of the other sub 4.4 guys later in the draft. I would also love to just see some sort of speed injected to the receiving core, even if they did add Higgins.
Yeah, I mean, for different ways, but I think either Iowa State receiver makes a lot of sense within this offense. Knoll Noel and JSN have some alignment redundancy, though I think they can both play on the outside and in the slot, so you can make it work. But they're very different skill sets, and Noel can absolutely bring that vertical threat that it would change what they have.
You're also going to get the Kubiak scheme, probably some tighter splits. I mean, everyone's a slot receiver in the Shanahan, Kubiak, McVay stuff. So, yeah, I think so. You're right. Like, receivers kind of become a need, even though they filled it a little bit with veterans. But yeah, interior offensive line. I don't think they go Tyler Booker in the first round or wherever. Yeah, I don't even think he's a fit for what they want to do there either. So they might be able to just go best player available and then circle back to fill in those offensive line needs with, again, I would look to Georgia if I have the IOL need this year. Good?
Yep.
NFC, baby. We did it.
Look at that timing.
Check the Mics brought to you by our friends over at Timeline, and get 10% off your order of MitoPure at timeline.com by using code CheckTheMic at checkout. MitoPure is a supplement that can help you because it encourages cellular renewal, works by promoting essential cellular cleanup process that clears out dysfunctional mitochondria, aka your cells' battery packs. There are no supplements on the market that have better clinical research shown it to be effective at targeting the effects of age-related cellular decline. With regular use, you'll see and feel the difference in the form of improved energy levels, better workouts, faster recovery, more endurance, and more. In fact, MitoPure is shown to deliver double-digit increases in muscle strength and endurance without a change in exercise. So awaken the strength, power, and resilience already in you with the first and only supplement clinically proven to rejuvenate health at the cellular level. Again, Timeline's offering 10% off your order of MitoPure. Go to timeline.com/checkthemic. That's TIMELINE.com/checkthemic. I don't want to jinx it, Sam. We're having a perfect show here. We're on time. Ad read came at the right spot. We're just halfway through. I just jinxed the perfect game in like the fifth inning, but we're good. Let's get to the AFC, baby. AFC East, biggest needs. Let's start. No, are we doing the East? Yeah, we're doing the East. Buffalo Bills. Start with the Bills. Biggest needs for the Bills.
Bills, pretty good roster, I think. Largely depth. I think they could use a second starting corner. They just re-signed Christian Benford to a nice extension. He's been an amazing story for them. Saved the bad draft pick of Kyer Elam in the first round by being a better player in the sixth and earning his extension. I think they could use the big-bodied nose tackle that we've talked about before with a couple of teams. They get paired with Kenneth Grant a lot in that first round. That I think makes a ton of sense if he makes it that far. Again, kind of similar to the Packers, except slightly differently. Like, do they need, forget the number one wide receiver, do they need an X receiver skill set? Do they need somebody that can play that X boundary, press coverage, outside perimeter alignment? Because they still don't have that. They haven't had it since they traded away Stephon Diggs, and they don't show any real interest in acquiring it. So it's at least worth asking the question, do they need that, or do they just not care?
Yeah, so if we're talking specific needs, you're right. I mean, you started with corner. I think that's first and foremost. I think they are this is right now, unless there is a Asante Samuel Jr. deal to be made, which was rumored quite a bit around free agency. Unless that's happening, to me, this feels a little bit like last year. We knew the Bills needed to draft a receiver early, and that was one of the biggest stories in the draft. They were sitting there at pick 27, I believe it was. Who are they going to pick? They traded down. Kansas City Chiefs went up and got Xavier Worthy. Right now, the cornerback feels like a similar spot where they're picking late first, and they're probably going to pick a corner unless they know they're picking signing Asante Samuel Jr. to be the starter opposite Christian Benford. If that is the case, though, and they bring in Samuel, that's awesome, man. Like, all of a sudden, you just are picking best player available, and you've got a first and 2 seconds. But I think that the late first-round corners, Azariah Thomas from Florida State, would make sense there. Chavon Ravel, I still think both him and Thomas have the long man coverage ability that it felt like Buffalo wants to play against Kansas City. And that's not necessarily Benford's skill set. He could do, he could play off. You play a little bit of press, but I do wonder if they want that press man skill set for when they're playing the Chiefs, which they didn't get a chance to really perform because of injuries last year, right? A couple times. So that's what I'm looking at late first for Buffalo. Defensive line depth. You mentioned the nose tackles. I really think Deion Walker from Kentucky is an intriguing upside type of play in the second round for them because of his length and size and movement skills, even though he had that back injury last year that hurt his play. What?
You now tinkered with the numbers and you think he's good again?
No, I've always thought that he ends up in the second round for teams unless it's like a chronic back injury. I've always thought of him as I've always been intrigued by the upside play. He's huge, man. He's huge and moves pretty well, even though he didn't test very well as far as explosiveness goes. He only had a couple tests at the combine.
Yeah, he's not. But this is the thing. Like it was sort of a little bit like like Mason Graham when he was listed at 320, and it's like, man, how does he move that fast for 320? It's like, well, he moves that fast for 320 because he's 295, right? Deion Walker's big, but he's not that big. Like,
someone corrected you that Graham lost a lot of weight right before they may have played at 305 or 310. Just
305 is still 15 pounds less than 320.
Oh,
the point is, when you're asking how does he move like that for 320, the answer is because he was never anywhere near 320. Like, that's how he moved that well for 320. I like as Deion Walker is big, but he's not like, Tavondre Sweat. He's not like the Eagles guy, Jordan Davis. Like, he's not otherworldly freaky big. He's just a pretty big nose tackle. And he moves like well for that, but not like freaky well. And offsetting that is that for all the good plays he makes is a ton of abysmal plays that he makes. Like, I'm just not like Jordan Davis was like all-time freaky Planet Theory, Bill Parcells type of world where you go, okay, I'm buying into that because there's one of those humans walking the planet right now. Deion Walker's not that. Like, he's not. It's we've been having this discussion off air a lot. Like, unless you're in the complete outliers of the sort of various things, if you're a 98th percentile plus athlete or size or whatever, or below the threshold, anything in the middle is basically the same. Is he 98th plus percentile anything?
Here you go again. That's what gets us off the rails, is you ranting about one player that I suggested as a potential
going
option
back
for
to
the
the
Bill.
Deion Walker thing.
I'm not going back on it. He's always been a second or third round type of player. Anyway, we lost it now. Jaden Higgins, man. Jaden Higgins for the Bills as well, if you want to fill that X receiver spot there. Trey Amos at corner, Maxwell Hairston, all of those cornerback options. I like Ravel and Thomas, though, a little bit better for the Bills. Let's go Miami Dolphins, their biggest need. People are asking, at least some people asking that we don't like each other again.
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
Maybe it's because you had to yell at me about Deion Walker.
Well,
Let's go Dolphins.
Be consistent, that's all I'm saying. Dolphins still need offensive line. Still a massive need. I think you could argue they need a left guard, a right tackle, and maybe a left tackle if Teron Armstead is he's in that world as well. You got a budget in quarter of the season missed, and B, he's reaching the end of his time there, right? So you could argue they still need 3 offensive linemen.
That's why Kelvin Banks feels like a great fit for the Dolphins in the first. Could he play guard right away? Sure. Kick out to tackle at some point. I think that's a really nice fit for Miami. Second round offensive line, Arante Ursary in the mix there. I mean, this could be a double up. Charles Grant from William and Mary, tackle guard ability. I think any of those guys that can play guard, like Josh Simmons, we keep talking about, probably doesn't start at guard. I always say that, but like Laramie Tunsil also felt like the guy that should never start at guard, and he did for Miami for 2 years. I think it was for 2 years. So maybe Simmons plays guard at some point too, but I would look to more of the players that could play guard but also have tackle ability. That's Kelvin Banks, could be Charles Grant later in the draft as well. But yeah, offensive line, I think the biggest need for Miami. I completely agree.
Yeah, and multiple spots on it.
Anything else for the Dolphins here? Maybe cornerback depth?
Yeah. I mean, I think they could use depth at a couple other spots, but to me, they're another one where like they have one really glaring acute need and the rest can kind of like, fill in.
So double up on defensive line for the Dolphins.
Offensive line.
Offensive line, man. It's because I've been telling everybody to double up on defensive line. Cornerback to me depends on what they think of Cam Smith, second round pick a couple years ago. Trusting him opposite Jalen Ramsey. I still think they need the youth play there, and they they could be looking at that second wave of cornerbacks as well. Darian Porter from Iowa State could be a nice fit for them.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're back staying on track.
Got to get back.
Are you mad
Got to
at
get
me?
back on track.
New York Jets. New York Jets are next. Biggest needs for the Jets.
So they still need the quarterback of the future. Like Justin Fields probably isn't that unless he shows another development, another step forward, another significant jump, which I think is theoretically there, but it's, the deal he signed is not like his quarterback is solved for the future. They need a cornerback too, opposite. My brain is just dying these days.
Sauce.
There you go, Sauce. It's like
you're almost 43, man. It's tough.
Stuff just falling out of my head. Like names don't exist anymore. The recall, like the memory, go back to memory bank, pull out the name. It's just like dead end. Like there's a wire frayed.
It's because
I know they brought in Brandon Stevens, but
we both have better recall in the 2010 decade than we do right now. It's bad. We got to push that. We got to push that out a little bit. Get some more 2025 knowledge in there.
There needs to be you get the program that was trying to run on my computer or cleans out the old crap. Like you need that for your brain. Purge anything pre 2010. We don't need that anymore. You need
temp files.
The new stuff. Anyway, I know they brought in Brandon Stevens, but listen to Ravens fans. They don't believe that Brandon Stevens is a guy that you want as your starting corner. It's definitely a massive downgrade over what DJ Reed was a year ago. They're another team like the Eagles' defensive line depth that's been chipped away at over the last couple of years. They need to kind of restock that. But quarterback, cornerback too, defensive line depth.
I'd throw right tackle specifically in there. That's why I think Armand Membo might be in the mix there at 7. The quarterback thing's interesting. We heard Aaron Glenn was talking about Justin Fields and his ability to run the ball and how they were going to tap into that. Does that mean that Jalen Milroe could be your developmental guy? Just because if you are, and I'm intrigued by this, Sam, right? Let me just throw this out there. We talk a lot about running quarterbacks raising the floor of offenses. Justin Fields almost made the Bears tank-proof in 2023, got them up to 7 wins because he wins a couple games with his legs. Last year, he's 4-2 with the Steelers, trending in the right direction. Is the floor actually kind of high now for the Jets? Because if they are going to tap into that for Fields, he's going to carry the ball 10 to 15 times per game. Is that how they're going to run their offense? And if that's the case, is Milroe the best developmental quarterback to sit behind Justin Fields here?
I mean, maybe, but when the Ravens kind of did this a little bit with Lamar Jackson and then Snoop Huntley, right? It's like you get a similar style of player so that you don't have to change anything when the starter goes down, as opposed to, if Joe Flacco is your backup, you got to junk the offense and go with something completely different when he has to come in. The difference being you knew Lamar Jackson was going to be the guy long term. I don't see there's not a point in maintaining the consistency if Justin Fields, if he's a 1-year deal, right? You don't work out this year, you move on, you go find a new quarterback. Well, then there was no point in finding a guy that's stylistically similar, except for the 2 games that you might have needed him for last year, which just doesn't, I don't know. I think if you're looking for a guy that's the future, you're just looking for who you think the best quarterback to develop is. You don't care that he's stylistically vaguely similar.
Quarterback, I don't know if they're going to see corners in need just because they're going to lock up Sauce, and they did sign Brandon Stevens. They opted into that. Whether you know what I mean? We have to look at it this is what the Jets did. They signed Brandon Stevens. We might not like him. The Ravens fans might not like him, but the Jets signed him to be their starter next to Sauce Gardner.
Yeah. I mean, 3-year, $23 million guaranteed over 3 years. It's definitely starter money, but is it enough to stop you drafting a guy that could be his replacement / competition?
No, I think again, second round's a good value there. I think defensive tackle too. They need probably some heft up front next to Quinnen Williams. Leonard Taylor, last year's UDFA, not always dependable off the field, which is why really talented player went undrafted. So I think they need some defensive tackle help as well. So insert all the defense. I'll just say Alfred Collins' name this time. Okay, insert all the defensive tackles that we've previously mentioned that should be considered here from the Jets. I think Membu, the more I think about it, though, if he's there at 7, the unsexy first pick for the new regime for the Jets, get the tackle, plug him in at right tackle. You've now drafted tackles 2 straight years. Probably the best way to kick things off here for the Jets.
You'd also argue they need wide receiver 2 as well. Obviously
Yes.
Garrett Wilson is fantastic, but like Alan Lazard, Josh Reynolds, who they signed, that's another. They opted in, but is Josh Reynolds stopping you signing a wide receiver 2? And then you get a lot of young guys that they haven't shown that they could be relied on as wide receiver 2 yet.
Reynolds is completely different though. It's a 1 year, $4.5 million deal versus Stevens making $12 million APY. So completely different, Sam. No, Josh Reynolds not keeping you from drafting a wide receiver. So they should grab one of that second wave of receivers for sure. All right, let's round out the East. New England Patriots and their biggest needs and why it's the offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as it's been. It's kind of like the Seahawks, the same problems from last year. You still need an offensive line. You still need a wide receiver group. You might need a running back as well, but like it's the 2 biggest needs. Obviously, now you need a backup quarterback too.
Backup quarterback because Joe Milton been shipped off to Dallas for some reason. Anyway, Patriots at 4, Will Campbell, Armand Membu, whoever you like better, grab a tackle. I mean, all the reports that they do like Will Campbell in the building, and the fact that he stretched his arm out and the tape measure said 33 one time. I think it's Campbell at 3, unless Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter is there. I'm sorry, at 4. I think it's Will Campbell at 4 for New England. Tick the left tackle box, and then maybe you double up at receiver again in this draft. Even though you did that last year, you have to find dependable options. Stephon Diggs could only be a 1-year deal. Even if he's there, you could still use 2 playmakers. Double up. Grab both Ohio State guys. You got ex-receiver Jaden Higgins. You got speed Jalen Knoll. Get Iowa State to New England.
You get the Iowa State guys. You get the Ohio State guy. Ibuka would be a good fit here. Even like Stephon Diggs can hold that outside spot for a year. Ibuka would be a great upgrade as the 2 or 3. Like you can't let last year. I like the process last year. I just spam the positions of need and hope that somebody shows up, and none of them did. None of them, like wide receiver or offensive line. Basically, none of them showed anything year 1. But I don't think that means the process was flawed. It means you just need to do it again and I hope that this time somebody shows up.
Is that the trend around the NFL, by the way? The Eagles draft all the Georgia players, and then the Rams doubled up on Florida State defensive linemen with Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, and that seemed to work. I mean, is that going to be the new copycat thing? Just draft teammates because they like each other?
Maybe. I always thought so. Somebody, who was it? Washington State. Kyle Williams, right? Somebody is pairing Kyle Williams to the Titans in the 2nd or the 3rd round because Kyle Williams used to play with Cam Ward. And I've always loved, and there's no evidence for this. It's annoying because it's like zero evidence that this is a thing. But I've always loved the idea of pairing a rookie quarterback with like his favorite college target. It fits in my head as a good thing. It seems like it should have value, and yet there's no evidence whatsoever that it does. But I really like that as a pairing.
Just cite Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I mean, look how well that worked. That's the only reason why it worked is because LSU.
Yeah, it's one data point for 2 guys that went in the top 5 picks or whatever it was.
All right, stay focused. That's it. New England good offensive players for New England. Those are their needs. AFC South. Let's go. Houston Texans here.
Houston Texans, I think, need defensive tackle help. I don't really love Sheldon Rankins, Tim Settle. I think they could definitely use an upgrade there. They still need offensive line help, though. So Mina poo-pooed this as an idea. I think that offensive line could be put together very quickly. I don't think it should have been anywhere near as bad as it was a year ago. And when you start looking at the personnel, I don't know how much of the problem was personnel, even with trading away Laramie Tunsil and theoretically taking the one good offensive lineman you had last year, getting rid of him. I think that if this offense in our world of creep back toward average, if I told you that right now, even without adding like a 1st-round offensive lineman, that this Houston Texans offensive line ranked 17th next year, would it shock you?
The offensive line being Cam Robinson's in to play left tackle. We don't know exactly what Titus Howard's going to do. He could play guard. He could play right tackle. Trent Brown is on the roster. I loved the signing last year for the Bengals, but he got hurt. But he would have been a creep back toward average type of right tackle stopgap. And then Jared Patterson, Juice Scruggs, Ed Ingram, Laken Tomlinson. You're trying to find, two starters out of that group. Patterson plays center, and then Scruggs, Ingram, and Tomlinson maybe playing guard. Maybe Tomlinson plays left guard and Titus Howard's played right tackle. Yeah, I'm just naming names, but yes, that could potentially creep back toward average, but I think it's on the lower end of probability, I would say.
Like, obviously you don't love any of it, right? But if that group, let's say the starting five ends up being Cam Robinson, Titus Howard, Jarrett Patterson, Juice Scruggs, and Blake Fisher / Trent Brown, that's easily capable of being an average to slightly below average offensive line. Like, it's a need in that you could upgrade any of those five positions relatively easily. But I don't think we're not looking at this group like it's the Tennessee Titans offensive line from a couple of years ago, where you're like, every single starting member of this line is cheeks and they need to be replaced immediately. I don't think that's what we're dealing with here. I think so much of what went wrong should not have gone wrong.
The problem is I think all those players are on the lower end of average, except maybe Cam Robinson and Titus Howard. I think that's the problem. And the right tackle spot, still a question mark. Trent Brown getting older, coming off of injury. You can't necessarily rely on him. If we're talking need, it still has to start with offensive line for the Titans, though, in my opinion.
But the two that are not below average, I think, are fine. I mean, they're average to above average. Cam Robinson, Titus Howard, and then the other three are young, so they might not be as bad as they looked last year.
I'm still talking Texans offensive line here. I think that's a bigger need than defensive tackle. If we want to, for the 10th different team here, name the 330 pounders as options for them, because that's not really Sheldon Rankin's game. Settle's okay. They have Mario Edwards. Those are, more penetrating type of defensive tackles. I do like Houston's defensive line depth though, but you can always add a little bit more. So add the big bodied nose tackles there, but I really think offensive line needs to be in play. Like if you added a Gray Zabel to that offensive line in the first round as a potential plug and play starter, maybe Howard kicks out to right tackle, then we're starting to get back toward a better spot there. And not even for the immediate future, it's also the long-term play. There's not a lot of offense. Cam Robinson's only there for 1 year. There's not a long-term play there for Houston. So I think Josh Connerly from Oregon could be in the mix there, compete at right tackle, kick out to left tackle next year maybe as Cam Robinson moves on. I think there's still a double up on the offensive line candidate here, given their needs.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think you could upgrade on any of the five. I just think people are going to treat that offensive line like it's, the worst unit in football. And I think that could very quickly end up being a reasonable offensive line.
The strongest point you made is, to me, I think less about the personnel thing and more about Bobby's out, offensive line coach is out. They just looked awful, picking up stunts, twists, blitz, any sort of extra pressure, sim pressures. They were just awful at all of that last year. That might just improve, personnel aside, even though I think the personnel could get better for Houston.
I think you could argue they need wide receiver as well. I mean, Nico Collins obviously is amazing as wide receiver one. Outside of that, Christian, we gave him Jack Besh, right, in our 2-round mock draft. Like I argued that Jack Besh would be the second best wide receiver on this team. You argued that there's no way he's better than Christian Kirk. Either way, I think that wide receiver 2/3 is a theoretical need, given the Tank Dell's injury and injury history at this point. Has to put him into the, it's a bonus if he comes back and is an impactful playmaker. But I think they basically have to be working under the assumption right now that there's a gap at wide receiver 2/3.
Yeah, I mean, I'd still love to see more receiver depth there for sure for the Texans. All right, let's go Indianapolis Colts. Biggest needs for the Colts heading into the draft.
So obviously you've got the quarterback thing, the way that the competition, Anthony Richardson versus Daniel Jones. It's a need in that if Jones wins that competition, they need a quarterback. If Richardson wins it, maybe they don't, but they might still anyway. Either way, it's not a this year thing, right? They can't go and draft another guy and throw him in there and look at now it's a 3-way competition. No, it's like, we'll give this a shot to work out. If it doesn't work out, then we're definitely in the quarterback market next year. Outside of that, though, I thought this is actually not a bad roster. Tight end is by far, that's the one glaring need. Outside of tight end, though, it's really depth. And, maybe they need another starting cornerback, but this is actually a pretty good roster.
I would add linebacker to the mix next to Zaire Franklin. That's the only other place I would really look as far as acute needs. I think they might be a sneaky option for Jahad Campbell in the first round. If you consider linebacker for the Colts in the new scheme with Lou Anarumo coming in, where he's had pretty active 3-down type of linebackers in Cincinnati, and Campbell could fit there. But you're right, like tight end is where everybody's given them. If Tyler Warren is still there, or if Warren goes in the top 10, hey, just give them Colston Loveland, because it is the most glaring. We don't have somebody dependable there. I know you used to love Will Mallory a couple of years ago, but Will Mallory's not keeping you from drafting the next tight end. I will say, as down as I am on the tight end group, if you add Tyler Warren especially for the Colts with his physicality and it's just another difficult body to cover. And he's got that 3-down run game ability. If Warren is there at 14, I'd be good with that, as far as, adding him for the Colts with all those other pass catchers, with what they want to do in the run game, whether it is Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones paired with Jonathan Taylor. I think that is an outstanding fit for the Colts. Loveland's a little bit, I think, less good in the run game, but it gives you a versatile pass game type of weapon to complement those guys. So I think either of those guys fit well for the Colts. Again, I just say they're sneaky in the mix for Jahad Campbell at linebacker if they're willing to go that route.
Yeah, to me, there are two like insta draft picks, like so obvious connections that you just make them. Mason Graham going to Jacksonville at 5, and then Tyler Warren going to the Colts at 14. I think if those guys are available when those teams are picking, it's just a snap, instant, turn the card in. Like Warren for this team fills the biggest need and is, I think, a really good player for them to grab.
I would say right guard potentially too. I mean, I don't know who's slated to step in there. Matt Goncalves played a little bit of tackle last year. It was more of a tackle coming out of college. They could be the Tate. They could grab Mullet, man. Tate Ratledge. Get him in there. Nice fit for Indianapolis. You're right, though. They are one of the teams, when you look up and down the depth chart, other than saying, hey, these here are some expiring contracts.
Yeah.
It's in pretty good shape from a depth perspective, which feels like the 7th straight year we're saying that for the Colts, right? That's kind of what Chris Ballard has done.
And it shows you the power of quarterback. Like they have a pretty good roster, and it doesn't matter at all if somebody does not emerge as a quarterback that can win for them from that competition, right? Whether it's, Daniel Jones, the next guy, or Anthony Richardson. It's like you've consistently built a pretty good roster, and none of it matters unless you get the quarterback position right. This is the problem, that Joe Shane is dealing with at the top of the draft. Like none of it matters unless you get the quarterback. It's the Andrew Berry thing where you've been praising overall his body of work, but the thing you got wrong was the worst thing you could possibly get wrong. And now,
confirmed right, Jimmy Haslam took all the blame. It wasn't Andrew Berry.
Those are two slightly different things, right? Like confirmed, Jimmy Haslam took responsibility for it publicly. That does not necessarily mean that Jimmy Haslam was responsible for it. Who knows? But anyway, the point being, that's the power of quarterback, that it is by far the single biggest needle moving thing. And if you don't get that right, you can build a really good roster, positions 2 through 53, and it won't mean anything.
All right, let's go. Jacksonville Jaguars, biggest need for the Jags heading into the draft.
Cornerback, I think, is a pretty big need for them. Defensive tackle, that's why we've been talking about Mason Graham being a great fit for them at the top of the draft. I think that still makes a ton of sense. They still need wide receiver help outside of Brian Thomas. Looks phenomenal, but you let Christian Kirk go. I don't know if Gabe Davis is, how much of an impact he makes in that role. I would love to see another guy added there, but cornerback and defensive tackle will be my two biggest ones.
Yeah, it feels like cornerback 2, receiver 2. I'm definitely on defensive tackle. I mean, I know Jags fans might be sick of seeing Mason Graham mocked to them at 5 overall, but I'm good with run the card in, get him on the team.
Yeah.
Get to the rest of the team building effort and get the second wave of corner. Get the Benjamin Morrises, Siobhan Ravel, naming them again as round 2 options. If the Jags came away with Graham and one of those corners, round 1 or 2, I would feel awesome about that defense moving in the right direction. And then receiver 2, right? I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. looks like a star, and then it's the deep threat, less dependable Gabe Davis, De'Ami Brown types. Can you get a dependable, more of a possession type of option opposite Brian Thomas Jr.?
Yeah, and De'Ami Brown, Gabe Davis, they're sort of similar potential skill sets or roles within the offense. I would just love to see that clear number 2 added to that team. I think it's a significantly lower need than cornerback 2, defensive tackle, which I think are fairly glaring.
No, but Drake in the chat mentions Teteroa McMillan. We've talked about him with Brian Thomas Jr. a few times. Again, I know you think at 5 that might be a little rich for McMillan. Yeah. And maybe it is, especially given where the perception is for him around the league. I'm just saying, in isolation, McMillan's skill set for Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence has not had a whole bunch of, hey, just throw it up to this big-bodied receiver and trust him to make a play. Has not had much of that for his career. We always wanted him to get his old college teammate T. Higgins somehow. We tried to pair him with Allen Robinson in a return to the Jags years ago. Just hasn't had much of that. I would love to see McMillan as a compliment to Brian Thomas Jr. So maybe they could trade down and do that. Like, I would be fine with that as an option for the Jags as well.
Yeah. To me, though, it's like, sure, if you could trade down and make that happen, I wouldn't turn down Mason Graham to make that happen, though. Like, if your options are select Mason Graham at 5 or trade down and maybe grab Ted McMillan later on, I would just turn in the card for Mason Graham.
Ooh, I'd have to see the balance sheet there. If it's Teteroa McMillan and Alfred Collins versus one Mason Graham, I think we've got a discussion there. If you're the Jags, you got to think about that. I love Mason Graham at 5 though. So awesome with that for the Jags. Let's wrap it up with the Tennessee Titans in the AFC South here. Their biggest needs, obviously, quarterback, and we're assuming Cam Ward will be that guy. But what else for Tennessee here?
Right. I'm assuming they're bringing in Cam Ward at this point. I think they need wide receiver 1 and 3. They're good at 2. Calvin Ridley, good 2.
It's good 2.
They need 1 and 3. And then like defensive depth, like edge rusher they need, cornerback they need, just defense generally.
We talked about Jalen Noel. We debated Jalen Noel. Would love that fit for Cam Ward with his speed. Yeah.
And Kyle Williams, his teammate. We already did it.
Kyle Williams, his teammate. So, look, they're in a tough spot, I think, because they're down a few picks. They're going to pick early in the second round and then not till late third round. And so for a team that's rebuilding and you're picking QB at 1, you're only going to have one other pick in the top 100. Would love to see them trade down and fill multiple needs, edge, all these other needs that still exist here.
What if we attack the teammate thing where there's no evidence for it? What if we do it? We could give him Kyle Williams, right, earlier in the draft, and then we could come back and get Restrepo late in the draft, and that's 1 and 3.
Elijah Arroyo to be Chigakonkwo's compliment there. Yeah, just keep throwing Hurricanes and Cougars at him.
Just everybody with familiarity with Cam Ward.
That's it. Get all of his guys. I think Jalen Noel would be an awesome fit, though. Really do. Even though they didn't play together, I think that would be an awesome fit for them. If they do want to go edge in the second round, remember Harold Landry's out. They have Arden Key, Draymond Jones, who's more of a hybrid type of player, Lorenzo Carter. Like, they need edge help. Yeah. That's in the mix for second round. So if one of those first rounders falls, I don't know where the NFL's going to land on Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. I honestly don't know if he could end up at pick 15 or pick 40, and I wouldn't be surprised. Actually, Harold Landry was a similar guy. Remember Landry, we kept mocking in the top half of the first round back in 2018, and whenever he was coming out, he ended up going in the second round to the Titans. If Ezeraku was there, Nick Scourton from Texas A&M, Landon Jackson from Arkansas, I could see them grabbing an edge, and I think all those guys could be in play in the second round as well.
Yep.
All right, that's the AFC South. 2 more divisions. Boom. 3/4 of the way there, Sam. We got this. Baltimore Ravens. A lot of Ravens chatter in the chat so far. Where are we going with the Ravens and their biggest needs?
I still think they need cornerback too. I know they made one of those perfect free agent signings. You bring in the guy that just stops you having to go chase the need. You bring in Chidobe Awuzie that stops you having to go chase the guy in the first round and fill the spot that opened up by letting Brandon Stevens walk. It is, however, the stopgap, right? It doesn't mean the need is evaporated. It just means it became less acute. So I would love to see them add cornerback too. I don't know, like, they're always in the sort of wide receiver market, right? I know that, again, they signed DeAndre Hopkins, same idea. Like, he stops you having to go chase it. I'd still love to see them at least add a wide receiver body. Offensive guard, I think you could conceivably upgrade either one of them, if not both. And then I never love Baltimore's edge rushers, but they always just cobble it together by the aggregate and by committee. But if they came out of this like with a first round edge rusher, I wouldn't be like, oh, that doesn't make any sense.
I see you, Drake, calling Marlon Humphrey cornerback 2 or 1 or 2 with him and Nate Wiggins. It's more about a full-time outside guy, with Humphrey being more of the ability to play outside and inside. So another outside type of corner. So I think all of those late first-round corners, right now the consensus board has only 2 corners going in the first, but in the second, it's Ravel, it's Benjamin Morrison, Trey Amos, Maxwell Hairston, Azariah Thomas, Darian Porter, all as second-round options. I think any of those guys could be late first round. Most of those guys are outside type of corners. I think any of those guys are in the mix there for Baltimore. I'm with you on the edge thing too. Like if we're talking about Howie and the Eagles, if the right guy falls, Bills, if the right guy falls, Ravens too, if the right edge rusher falls and is there late first round, I think that'd be outstanding for them. Are they in the nose tackle market with Travis Jones? He was a second rounder. He's heading into year 4. He's a good player. Are they going to want to pay him the 15? Is he worth 15 to 20 million just as a solid nose tackle in today's NFL? And if they don't want to pay that type of money, do they want to replace him with the Alfred Collins, Deion Walker type?
And they've let a couple of those guys they've lost a couple of those guys in the last couple of years. I mean, Brandon Williams, reached the end of his career. Michael Pierce reached the end of his career. Like they used to have this collection of like 330-pound bowling ball defensive tackles, and they've lost a couple of them. And then Travis Jones is reaching, the end of his first contract, whether or not they keep him. But if they still value that as like a key piece to that defense, it's a sort of lacking skill set relative to previous years.
And then we could talk about safety with Adarius Washington only back on 1 year. All of the top safeties, Malachi Starks, Nick Emanwari in the mix, Xavier Watts if you want more of a pure free safety. Get the Notre Dame connection. Xavier Watts and Kyle Hamilton, get Notre Dame's back there. Safety could be positioned to take a look at as well. I like the suggestion of Tyleik Williams. I kind of forget him as like the 330-pounder because he's not as tall as some of the. I'm picturing this draft has the 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" nose tackles. Tyleik Williams still maybe the best run-stopping nose tackle option. Very Ravensy type of player. Like him better in the second than the late first, but also could be a future Raven. All right, let's go Cincinnati Bengals. Biggest needs for the Bengals, and why is it the defensive line?
If it's not the offensive line,
if it's not the
trenches,
both
it's trenches.
Guard and any sort of front. I would even say front 7 playmaker for the Bengals, but yeah, more specifically defensive tackle and the edge.
Yeah, defensive tackle. Edge rusher as well. I mean, you've got the Trey Hendrickson standoff thing. Even with Trey Hendrickson, he's the one edge rusher, pass rusher. It's kind of like a Nick Bosa situation where he's one guy trying to do the whole thing by himself. So the whole defensive line, the interior of the offensive line, like they just need both trenches to be hammered, I think.
We gave them Mullet, Tate Ratledge in the second round, a little bit higher than he's expected to go as of now at the consensus board. Wouldn't hate that, though, as a fit. And then the Walter Nolan, Mike Green picks that the Bengals get quite often in the first round, I do think make a ton of sense for them.
Yeah, I think any of those defensive linemen in that first round range make a ton of sense. I would be interested in safety as well. I know I never loved the Geno Stone signing at the time. It felt like a buy high, slightly fool's gold type of acquisition, and it certainly hasn't worked out yet. Jordan Battle, I feel sort of marginal to me as a starter anyway. I think you could theoretically upgrade either one of those spots. I think they'll rely on the young corners, the combination of Dax Hill, DJ Turner, Cam Taylor-Britt. I don't think that's a need yet, though it may emerge as one. Defensive line, offensive line.
So I've mentioned Xavier Watts a bunch, but now you got to mention him again because Al Golden was his defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. So if we're gonna keep playing these games, right? We don't do this a ton during draft season. There are some people who play that a lot, which is like this guy coached that guy, and think about all these connections.
And it happens.
I only get there like a little bit, but it is a factor, right? That's what think about free agency. Oh, this guy coached him 3 years ago. That's why he's bringing him in. Harold Landry is being reunited with Mike Vrabel. But Xavier Watts, I think, is legitimately a second-round option for the Bengals at safety, especially given He's just a good, dependable, in the right place at the right time safety. And that's maybe what the Bengals have really been missing these last couple of years.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
All right, we gave them some options, a lot of the same ones we've talked about previously. Let's go Cleveland Browns, their biggest needs here.
I mean, quarterback. The people are people are reporting like, it's believed that Deshaun Watson's played his last snap as a Brown, as if that's news, like as if that wasn't true for a long time already. Kenny Pickett is not an answer at quarterback. They need a quarterback, whether or not it's Shedeur Sanders at the top of this draft. I think they need wide receiver 1 as well. They need defensive tackle help. Like, they need quite a lot.
Let me throw this out there, Sam. The Browns show that you and I do every now and again, there was a quote they played a quote from Andrew Berry that said, the QB room will, quote, skew young this year, end quote.
Okay.
So I read into that. I read deep into that. I'm going to assume that if they pass on Shedeur Sanders, the Browns, who are very analytically inclined, one of the biggest analytics teams in the NFL, if not the biggest, could they, in a world where there's 4 through 8, these QBs are all developmental options, could they go 2 of them? Is this a world? Could they go Abdul Carter 1, first-round pick, and then pick your 2 favorite? They go Dylan Gabriel and Will Howard or whatever. They go 2 quarterbacks, because if it's going to skew young, it's those 2 rookies and Kenny Pickett. Here, fight for it.
An IR, so Deshaun Watson to IR, and then have 2 rookies and Kenny Pickett.
Yes. Watson. I mean, Watson's out. He may have played his last snap in the NFL, right? I mean, nobody's going out of their way to go get Deshaun Watson. The only thing that he could do is if the Browns try to salvage him. It sounds like that's done. So
no. I mean, the thing with Deshaun Watson is not will he play or not. It's like, are you stuck carrying him as a roster spot? I assume, given he hurt his Achilles again, you have a fairly easy runway to just throw him on IR and forget about him.
Yeah, and you bought the insurance and just move on. If they're not sold on Shedeur Sanders, is this Kyle McCord and Jalen Milroe, right? Pick your favorite 2 developmental quarterbacks. I'm throwing that out there as an option for the Browns. I might throw it into the Twitter ether and see what people think. 2 developmental quarterbacks going to Cleveland, baby. I might even consider that. You get your blue chip Abdul Carter, and then mystery box it, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't think that Sanders is the guy, right? Like, to me, Shedeur Sanders is a potential out from this horrible situation that they put themselves in, right? This Deshaun Watson nightmare. You have a potential lottery ticket out of that by getting the number 2 overall pick and being in a position to draft a quarterback. If you've looked at the tape and you just don't think Sanders is that guy, you think the tools are too marginal, the concerning level of behavior under pressure / taking sacks, like, we just don't believe it. Okay. Then I think you're right. Like, the next solution has to be, we still need, the only way out of this is still to find a dirt cheap quarterback. So let's go get a couple of them and hope one of them is the guy. That makes sense.
All right, let's fill the spots. You give your 2 quarterbacks. I'll give my 2. Who are the 2 developmental quarterbacks the Browns could add in this particular scenario? Abdul Carter at 2, and then 2 quarterbacks at somewhere later in the draft. Who you got?
Does either of them have to start?
No, it's just, who do you want to? Which 2 mystery boxes do you want to maybe bring in, and eventually they become good? Who are your 2 guys in this draft class?
But that's the thing. So Kenny Pickett is starting. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, but one of these guys could steal the job.
All right. Dylan Gabriel and
don't pick the same ones as me.
Dylan Gabriel and Will Howard.
Oh, the local legend, right? Just led the Buckeyes to the title. I was considering that. I'll go Dylan Gabriel and Kyle McCord. Give me those 2 guys. Give me the 2 big arms guys, different sizes, 2 big arms. Dylan Gabriel, Kyle McCord.
Are you a lot of Browns fans, or a lot of Browns places will connect them with Tyler Shuck from Louisville? Are you out on him the second you saw that play where he just like, woo?
Yes. I think that is if you haven't seen the Tyler Shuck play, he panics under pressure. And as JT O'Sullivan, our friend JT said, is that fake? Like, he thought this was AI generated.
It's such a crazy throw that it genuinely looks like somebody has faked it. Like, it's panicking in a way I don't know that I've ever seen before. I have
Will
seen quarterbacks do crazy things under pressure. And for example, it's not necessarily like there's a play that Brock Purdy had at Iowa State where he like does a Kirk Cousins and like launches it backwards out of pressure. Like I've seen crazy things before. I have never seen anything like this. Nothing ever.
It was bad. It was Will Levis is watching this being like, come on, man, that's a bad decision. Can't be doing
It
that.
genuinely,
That's
what
panic.
it looked like was someone had been pulled out of the crowd, put in at quarterback, and it was like the first time they'd ever encountered a 300-pound running human headed towards them, and they just went like, ugh, launched the like hot potato, just threw it away, underarm towards nothing.
Anyway, I liked a lot of other Tyler Shuck film. It might be like one play and you're out on him. Anyway, we've given some fun options for the Cleveland Browns. There's some other needs as well, but we figured out quarterback. All right, let's go Pittsburgh Steelers. Biggest needs. We got 5 more teams here, Sam. We're making good time. Here. Let's go, baby.
Well, they desperately need a quarterback right now. Is that Aaron Rodgers? Are we assuming that's QB taken care of?
I'm going to assume Aaron Rodgers is there, and then we're talking developmental guy. I'm going to assume we're out on, hey, they're drafting Jackson Dart in the first, and he's going to be their starter right away. But who the heck knows?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're bringing in Aaron Rodgers, I do think you're probably out of that certainly early quarterback market. You're in the more like Rams market of like the future, which you may or may not care about later in the draft. I think they probably need a left tackle. Well, starting tackle. Pick your side. I think Broderick Jones needs to be removed from the lineup. Is effectively what I'm saying.
They're not going to give up on their first round pick. No,
it's been a while.
In year 3, he's going to head into year 3.
Yeah.
No. Fautano
You're telling me a liability in year 3 is too soon to give up on him?
He's not much worse than what Dan Moore was through 2 years, and they were plugging him in for 4 straight, and he got better.
I don't think that's true. I think he's significantly worse than Dan Jones. He's significantly worse than Dan Moore was outside of playing Myles Garrett.
I don't know. I mean, there's some ugly on there from Broderick Jones, but I think he's the starting right tackle. Fautano will play left tackle. That was the plan last year. I don't see that as a need. I think receiver.
I think that's a pretty clear need. Like Fautano, you would assume plays one and hopefully plays well. Broderick Jones at this point is a liability, particularly if Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback.
Maybe they should put Broderick back to the left side just to see if that's better. But I think receiver, just because I don't think we know what's going to happen with George Pickens, and even if we do, he's in the last year of his deal. I don't know if you want to. I don't know how him and DK are going to last long term. I don't know how Pickens is going to last long term. So I think receiver, very much a need for the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, certainly as a long-term plan, Roman Wilson is obviously the X factor there. Basically didn't see him year 1. Like he was a guy a lot of people liked at draft time. We don't know what he's going to be yet, if anything. So, but that's a potential factor there. I also think they need a running back. They got rid of Najee Harris in free agency. I don't think you want Jalen Warren being a bell cow. The rest of those running backs, Kenneth Gainwell, Cordero Patterson at like 182 years old. Like, I think they, in this draft amongst, or above all others, I think you would love to just grab a running back in the mid-round somewhere.
They're actually one of the biggest running back needy teams, I would think. I mean, they could just roll with Jalen Warren the same way the Cowboys rolled with Rico Dowdle when they felt like they had a need. But I expect the Steelers to take a running back, yes.
Who do you want to put there? Because there's one.
Scatterboo.
Yes.
Of course. Scatterboo's a Steeler. He's a Steeler.
Is there a more hard-nosed, black and blue Pittsburgh Steelers working class hero than Scatterboo?
They don't have a need there, but if any team could just get Tyler Warren in the first, Besh in the second, Scatterboo in the third, man, that's it. Your physicality through the roof. I did it again. I did it 2 straight shows. Anyway, Scatterboo, future Steeler. That's the guy. That's the guy for them. Or Damian Martinez. I don't know. We could give him some other bruiser type just to balance it out.
Fair weather guy. Miami. Can't go
best developed
Pittsburgh.
They've been linked to Milroe quite a bit. And as we've mentioned with the Steelers before, when they're linked to someone, it's usually not a bluff. There's usually just intel coming out. I could see them bringing in Milroe as the developmental quarterback option. And I would like that. I think that'd be a solid 3rd round pick if that's where they would want to go. Remember,
generally I'm intrigued by Milroe as an option anywhere. Like I'm kind of talk myself into his upside.
Yeah, not having a 2 hurts their ability to maybe use one on a developmental option. Maybe you don't want to in this draft, but I still think that's very much in play for them.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. One more. 7 out of 8 divisions done. We're on to the AFC West. Denver Broncos, their biggest needs here.
Denver Broncos' biggest needs, again, wide receiver 1 or 2, depending on what you think Cortland Sutton actually is. It doesn't really matter for the designation purposes, but I think they do need that secondary threat. They got a lot of young guys that they drafted that they quite like, but I don't know that you can rely on any of them. Vele, Franklin didn't show much year 1. Marvin Mims has become more of a kind of move around matchup player. I think they really need that secondary threat with Cortland Sutton there. Again, another team that I thought they're in pretty good shape. Like running back, sure. Tight end, maybe. Is Evan Engram stopping you drafting a tight end if you love one of them? If Colson Loveland is there, is Evan Engram stopping you draft him? No. But this is a pretty good roster.
No, I mean, I said Evan Engram might keep you from forcing a tight end, but if you
right.
I think Evan Ingram's dependable receiver. If you also added a Colston Loveland to the mix, that's an intriguing option. Man, the more people talk about Teterow and McMillan falling, that feels like it could be the slam dunk for the Broncos picking him, beyond pick 15. I mean, any team picking McMillan beyond 15, whether it's the Bucs at 21, the Broncos at 20, that feels like a great fit there. I would love McMillan for the Broncos if he's that low. And then, pick your favorite running back. Scatterboo would be a nice fit here for the Broncos. Scatterboo and Estime, 1-2 punch in the backfield. How could you stop that? Ohio State guys, Omarion Hampton in the first. Would you hate that? Because the other pieces are in place, as you said, in this roster.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
We've seen that linked a little bit as far as Hampton going to the Cowboys at 12, Broncos at 20. That's come up a few different times here. But I think receiver's interesting because I think they were getting it done last year, but if they did have one more really good option there, I think that'd be huge. So I think McMillan, I think Luther Burden would be good there. They kind of have the speed guys as far as Mims and Franklin go. Franklin just has to catch the ball more consistently. So they kind of have the guys that get they have the guys that can get behind the defense. So I think that's less of a need for them than it is for some of the other teams that we've mentioned. So just more of a dependable receiver on the outside, I think would be great for Denver.
Yep.
Good. Kansas City Chiefs. Biggest need here for the Chiefs.
Left guard, particular.
Replace
the offensive line.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which one of us is glitching? Whose internet's this?
That was you.
Okay.
I don't think we glitched. I think I just talked over you. And I just said, replace Joe Thuney. So left guard for the Chiefs.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm still seeing slow internet. Yeah, Joe Thuney, obviously you trade him away. You bring in Jalen Moore as left tackle. It's the kind of gamble that may or may not pay off. To me, they're a perfect team for one of those tackles / guards in the first round. All the guys that everyone's talking about as, are they a tackle? Are they a guard? Which way do we need to go? If they could get a Kelvin Banks in the first round, if he slipped that far, I think that would be amazing for them. But I think they need a starting guard because I don't know that you want to trust Kingsley Suamataia or Mike Caliendo there this year.
And I love what our friend Eric Edholm did when we stole his first round mock as a launch point on Monday. He had a trade up for Oregon defensive tackle Derek Harmon, which reminds of, a defensive tackle option next to Chris Jones. And Harmon has been compared to Chris Jones quite a bit. I think interior pass rusher. Kansas City should be in play for Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, any kind of interior pass rush presence next to Chris Jones, or just another body on the defensive line, right? I think Felix Anudike-Uzomah not looking like a great first-round pick a couple years ago. George Karlaftis is looking like a good first-round pick, but could they go first-round edge again, especially if the right guy is there, late first-round pick? Absolutely. So I think Kansas City's defensive line depth overall, as well as that specific left guard need on the offensive line.
Yeah, they need to replace the depth. They quietly have kind of lost some significant defensive line depth pieces, Tershawn Wharton, guys like that. They could, I think, really stand to build that back. And if you need to spend a first round draft pick on it, it's not crazy, certainly. And then I think they need I don't know if it's how acute a need it is, but like the tight end wide receiver kind of room, right? Like Travis Kelce is definitely reaching the end at this point. I think we've now passed the point where we can say, he can turn it on when it matters. He still, it just takes a while to get back into the season. Like Kelce's declining at this point. And the wide receiver room, as much as it should be better than it was a year ago, we still don't really know what that looks like, right? They're bringing back Hollywood Brown after we didn't really see him last year. You've got Xavier Worthy going into the next year with what he's shown, the speed receiver. Rashee Rice coming back from the knee injury. They have a lot of bodies there, but there's a lot of unknown with that group. Like if again, I haven't seen them linked to this at all, but like if the right first round wide receiver was available at the bottom of the first round, it wouldn't be crazy to me for them to pounce on that guy.
Double up, back-to-back years, first round receiver.
Yeah.
I could see it. I mean, you mentioned tight end too. We don't know what ends up happening with Kelce. If Colston Loveland is there, we know it's what happens with the Chiefs all the time. Xavier Worthy, if any other team took Xavier Worthy in the first, you'd be like, oh man, that's a little higher than I expected. Once you give him to the Chiefs, it's like, whoa, him and Mahomes. Imagine Colston Loveland with Mahomes, right? Oh, here's the next tight end who's going to have this great pass game feel with Pat Mahomes and all that. So I think the right pass catcher in the late first round, absolutely, you would think about it. So yeah, I think those all make sense for the Chiefs. I'll just throw safety out there as well. Their depth has taken a little bit of hit. Justin Reed moving on, safety at least in the middle rounds. I think they'll go there with at least one of their picks. Let's go. Los Angeles Chargers filled their tight end need with the International Pathway Program yesterday. Did they not? Chargers' biggest needs here. Okay?
I mean, that is one of my biggest two needs for them was tight end. Wide receiver is obviously still a need for them. Tight end, defensive line, cornerback, like some more depth pieces. But like they need another impact pass catcher, whether it's wide receiver or tight end.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the Chargers are an interesting spot because I think pass catcher, edge, they have some specific needs where I think the first round value is there. There's a lot of different paths they can go, especially in the first, but I love the Luther Burden fit for them. I could see Matthew Golden being the guy as a receiver. I could see it being tight end and being Colston Loveland if he's there was it 22 for the Chargers. So I think pick your favorite pass catcher in the first round, or if the right edge rusher's there, right? The guy that bring back only 1 year of Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa moving on. I think edge rusher or receiver, especially in the first round, is where the Chargers end up going here.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. By the way, the IPP guy that they signed is one of the more interesting names from this year's class, Jordan Pataya. Like he's got legit high-end rugby credentials. A lot of these other guys, they were just about hanging around the bottom of like a club team. He's a serious Australian international who was a high-end player. 6'3", 225 was also his listed weight as a rugby player, where he had to run around for 80 minutes at a time. Apparently, that's basically what he was at the pro day as well. I would view tight end as more of a nominal designation. Like when I spoke to the IPP guys last, they didn't know what position Pataya was going to play. They weren't sure if he was going to be a running back, a wide receiver, a tight end. This feels like we have to call him something because you can't just write athlete on the thing. But they basically grabbed an athlete, I believe. Now, that being said, 6'3", 225 is broadly speaking what Brock Bowers is in size. So it's not like, you can carve a receiving tight end role at that size, but I would basically label him right now as they've just signed an athlete.
Big slot could be the big slot.
Yeah.
I would also look. It's interesting to me that the Chargers might have that pass catcher need, and that's what they're labeling him. We'll see what ends up happening there. They also could use the big body defensive tackle. I think they at least spend one of their picks on the Deion Walker, Alfred Collins, Tyleik Williams. I think would be a really nice fit for the Chargers. I feel like 10 straight years of getting them a run stopping nose tackle. They had Poona Ford for a bit, but getting another good run stopper up front has felt like a 10-year issue, maybe 15 now for the Chargers.
What about you keep obviously gravitating towards these big buddies, right? What about a CJ
Small.
West, a guy, because they lost Poona Ford, right? Who's this
Yeah.
undersized nose tackle who's a really impactful player. What about grabbing CJ West, who's not, 330, 340, but is a really, really good run defender?
Yeah. Thank you for moving beyond the same names. That's a beautiful addition there. Indiana CJ West. Chargers.
And,
Good Chargers option.
getting you to stop just profiling people. Big body equals, positivity. Just, asking you to look beyond your own class of people.
I'm like the biggest advocate for shorts, for smaller people. We're almost. I mean, we've kept pace, Sam. We've done a great job. Given the 5-minute intro, the massive Joe Milton news that we needed to cover, we have done an outstanding job. It's a little over 2 hours, but this is a huge win for us heading into our final team here.
Huge win. It's
the Las Vegas Raiders. Needs for Walt's lowly Raiders, as he calls them.
Walt's lowly Raiders. I still think they're kind of like the Cardinals. They could use defense everywhere, like they've got a couple of playmakers there, but there's not a level of that defense where you couldn't add somebody and him walk in immediately as a starter and a useful, upgrade. Like you could argue that edge rusher is the least needy. Like you've got Max Crosby, obviously their best player. They brought back Malcolm Kuntz. You've got Tyree Wilson, who is at least taking steps in the right direction. So I could buy the argument that they don't need an edge rusher, but like you could have a defensive tackle alongside Christian Wilkins. You could have a linebacker. You could have a corner. You could have a safety, all of whom could immediately walk into the starting lineup.
Yeah. So I think if we're just talking specific positions on the defense, I think corner specifically, Jack Jones, we'll see how he fits in the new system, and Eric Stokes are the starters. I think they need to add a starting caliber corner for sure. Probably not with the top pick. So second round Raiders, I think did we give them Trey Amos? We gave them one of those second wave of corners. I think all those guys are in play there for the Raiders in the second round. I'm fascinated by a Mason Graham addition there. I know they already have Christian Wilkins, but I mean, I love coming out of the draft and saying, look at this position group. And if you came out of the draft and you looked at the Raiders with one more impact player on the defensive line that has Max Crosby, has Christian Wilkins, Kuntz, some of the players you mentioned, Tyree Wilson, who's coming on a little bit, moving around the defensive line, whether it's a big nose tackle type, whether it's a Mason Graham penetrating type, or whether it's just one of those edges. Maybe Nick Scourton falls in the second round and now you just, rolling 3 and 4 deep on the edge. I think any sort of defensive playmaker for the Raiders makes a lot of sense here. But I think acute need, we're talking they need a starting cornerback, maybe even 2 for this year and beyond.
I would love to see an extra pass catcher added, kind of in the same bucket as the Chargers. I don't really care like where it fits, and I like the difference being like for them, Brock Bowers is their number 1 receiver, right? And I that's fine. I don't think it means you necessarily need that number 1 wide receiver, but Bowers, Jacoby Myers, that's a really nice duo. I think I would like to see one more body somewhere, right? One more useful contributor as a receiver, whether it's outside, whether it's another slot guy, whatever that is. I just want one more weapon that I'm comfortable with. Running back is still a need, I think. I actually like Sincere McCormick. I think he's a good player. They brought in Raheem Mostert. But if you like, they've been linked to Ashton Genty a lot at the top of the draft, which is probably as high as I think you can possibly argue that he should go based off, the teams that are involved. I wouldn't hate it. I would get it. I wouldn't hate it. I don't think I would do it given the needs that they have, but like Ashton Genty, I think would turbocharge that offense.
Because we're at the end, I'll just open up this conversation really quick here, but the conversation they're having in the building, they could easily talk themselves into Genty, because every time you're talking about, do we pick this player in the first round? You're thinking about where's the rest of the depth at the position. You could talk yourself into, well, there's plenty of receiver depth. There's also plenty of running back depth. But then you could say, okay, when has Pete Carroll been successful? It's when he's got his bell cow running back. What was the issue with Geno Smith last year? They couldn't pass protect. They couldn't run the ball effectively. We're going to do that with Ashton Genty. Right or wrong, I could just see the conversation steering there. Let's just get Genty now. I know Scadaboo's available later. I know the Ohio State guys are available later. I know that there's depth there, but we can get him now. But there's also depth at receiver. There's also ways to fill these other spots later. I could see them going that route with Genty.
Yeah, and I think as much as we always talk about, well, what does the depth look like the next round? What is, where are the players we can get in the second, third at these positions? I do think at basically every position, certainly within NFL buildings, the math changes when you're talking about a blue, quote unquote, right? A guy that is in the blue chip, the difference, the special level. Genty should be in that group for every NFL team, I think. Like, people are down on this draft generally because they don't think there's a lot of blue chip players. Abdul Carter is one. Travis Hunter is one. These are the players. Like, then you're debating, is Mason Graham in that blue chip? I think Genty's in that. He's in that Mason Graham tier where we're like, if he isn't, it's only because it's a running back, right? But he is theoretically a blue chip, different type of player. Like, I think the gap between Genty and Hampton, who's most people's number 2 consensus running back 2, is larger than the gap between Hampton and running back 3, whoever you want to make that. So you can definitely make the argument, if you're the Raiders, that like, don't overthink it. Just take the blue chip guy and we'll figure out the rest later on.
The blue chip discussion is real. And I think in a lot of buildings, it might even trump the positional value or the financial aspect of it. Really quick, Mohall in the chat says, hey, Tom Brady, the GM, won't let that happen. I don't think Brady's analytically inclined there. I think, honestly, that conversation is going to be like, hey, I remember, guys, when I got Corey Dillon in 2004, that was great for me. I loved how you hear him on the broadcast. I love how much the run game helps the quarterback. He, like Peyton Manning does. They're not the analyst nerd types. They're like, I like the run game, running. It's just another position. They're not playing that analytics game.
I actually think those guys, like if Tom Brady or Peyton Manning calling the shots, makes it more likely that happens. I think they're absolutely more likely to say the running back, an elite blue chip running back, that sets up play action. Like, it's all the old caveman conversations you've heard for 30 years, of which there is some validity. It's not complete fabrication. Like, there's something, there's kernels of truth to that. But I think those guys are, particularly those two, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, are like full red pilled on that stuff. Like, they believe all of that.
We told, Peyton has his own, we drafted Edgerrin James at 4 or 5, whatever it worked for us when we got Edgerrin. It worked for us when we got Corey Dillon. They're gonna, they would tell those first person stories and say that's what Gino needs is Ashton Genty. Anyway, we did it almost. We did a pretty good job here. The all 32 team show in under 2 hours and 13 minutes. That's what
definitely a record for us.
It is a great record. Appreciate everybody being with us here. Don't forget, check the Mike Studio coming soon. Make your plans for draft night. We're going to be live during the draft Thursday night, April 24th for round 1, all of round 2, and then we'll start. We'll be in and out for round 3. Hopefully, we'll be in our new studio. We'll figure out what's going on there. Check out the smww.com for my class. Come meet me in my class, SMWW, teaching football analytics, telling stories with football data. Go check it out, smww.com. All right, Mock Draft Monday coming up this week. Join us again, 9 a.m. live Eastern time. Anything else here today, Sam, on the way out?
No, let's bounce.
All right, great show. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Monday with more. Check the mic.